go ahead and make it, go ahead and transfer it. It is automatic. You write a rule, and that rule is applicable for all the orders. And based on that, you would have your automatic supply creation processes. Using the back-to-back, you would have reservations. You create order. That order will be reserved against any entity. It could be buy, make, transfer, and all of this stolen or misallocated to some other order. So you have got various capabilities around back-to-back, and this is how you would eventually summarize it. You get an order, you create the demand, and then based on the demand, we will trigger the supply creation, and then supply creation processes would make sure that the supply is available within the date specified by GOP, and then supply will be available within your warehouse, and then you will eventually ship it to your customer. You have got a dropship. Within dropship, we don't use the supply chain orchestration product. What we do is you get the customer order, and then GOP would identify that this is the dropship order, and it will be fulfilled by a supplier, and then system will automatically raise a purchase order for that particular supplier. And when that supplier gets the purchase order, the ship to location would be your customer location. So that supplier would know that you will have to go ship it to your customer. And then you have got your various mechanism where you have your advance shipment notices, and based on the advance shipment notices, you can eventually start your billing processes. So Srini will come later today and talk about dropship in greater detail. He has got very good demonstration. You have got internal material transfer. As I mentioned, that we support movement of goods within the enterprise. It could be from planning. Planning says that I have got certain forecast and I have supply within various other warehouses. Go ahead and move that from that warehouse to this warehouse. Or you could have inventory min-max. You have item fulfillment set up, and you could use inventory min-max. If the threshold goes beyond this limit, go ahead and transfer, or you can say go ahead and procure it, whatever you want. All of this would be in GOP. Or you could have sales order. You raise the sales order will be demand, and then in GOP you would know that there is a supply somewhere, and then bring that supply here and then ship it. Or you can use the spreadsheet upload. If you know that you want to move the goods from this warehouse to other warehouse, you can use the Excel capability to move those materials within the enterprise. So you have got various ways you can trigger the internal material transfer, and there are various orchestration rules. By default, we do something in context of how you want to move the goods or material. So whenever you have internal material transfer, we would transfer using that as a transfer order. But you have flexibility to move the goods as a purchase order. You raise a purchase order. And this is something which you'll have to specify in the orchestration rule or the execution rule. The execution rule is OBR, where you can specify whether you want to move the goods via purchase order. By default, it will be a transfer order. So transfer order is the entity which will be used to track your internal movements of good. And at its default, you can have your purchase order to track that. You have got a concept called supply chain financial orchestration. As I mentioned, that Srini will come back on day 4 and he will talk about supply chain financial orchestration in greater detail. From the conceptual standpoint, you may have physical movement of good, which is different than the financial movement. I think you guys would know that there is nothing wrong in moving the goods, and then movement of good could be different, and financial movement or financial accounting of those movement could be different. And this you can use for booking more profit wherever you have less taxes. It could have your Brazil, you route your goods or material through Brazil in US, and you book more profit in Brazil because you have less taxes. Or you could use various other example like moving the goods from China to US, but you route your financials from Singapore, because Singapore you eventually pay a little less tax, and there is nothing wrong. It's all legal. So that's something called financial supply chain orchestration. So you got consigned inventory. Consigned inventory starts from the consignment order between you and your supplier. And when you have a consignment order, there are various terms. Those terms would define whether or not you want to take the ownership within certain days, and there must be certain days specified. Or you can take the ownership as soon as you use those goods or material somewhere within your work order, or you ship it using your sales order. You could use it into web jobs and so on. So you have certain terms and conditions associated to it, how you want to consume it, within how when that aging should start. Because if you are saying that I will take the ownership of all these goods within 30 days, when you want to start the aging, whether at the time of receipt or at the time of shipment and so on. So you'll have various terms and conditions within your agreement, and that's the triggering point where your consignment process would start. And as soon as you have your agreement, you create a consignment order based on those agreement, and then that consignment order would go to your supplier, and nothing different than the normal purchase order. You have got another entity called consignment order. It will go to your supplier, and then supplier will acknowledge that consignment order and ship the goods to you, and that would be your consignment inventory, we can say. And then receiving of consignment inventory is nothing different than the normal receipt. You would go receive it, and then you have flexibility to keep track of your consignment order or the inventory consignment item and then inventory item, and then you can have flexibility to track the consignment on hand. And you have flexibility to move the goods from one sub-inventory to another sub-inventory, and then you can write a rule called, if you are moving the goods from this sub-inventory to the other sub-inventory, whether or not you want to take the ownership or you may want to keep that as consigned, you can write all of these rules. Eventually, you would consume those goods, and then based on the consumptions, you can send the consumption advice to your supplier. And then consumption advice is the entity which you use to bill it to your supplier, or to pay to your supplier. So when you create the supplier invoice, you have flexibility to match your line with the consigned advice or the consumption advice. And then that would make sure that you're not overpaying to your supplier. Right, and you have flexibility to pay on check to enable the function called pay on use. As soon as you use it, you yourself create a supplier invoice within the AP and then pay it to your supplier. You can do all of this using consigned inventory flow. You have got contract manufacturing flow. What we do here is you completely outsource. When I shouldn't be using the outsource terminology because some of you may get confused. You can have your contract manufacturer to manufacture on behalf of you, and it is entire product. So let's say you get an order from your customer, and then you book the order, and then we as in GOP schedule the order, and GOP understand that manufacture using the external warehouse or external entity, and then you would have your supplier. And supplier in this case is the contract manufacturer. So what you do is we create a work order which will eventually be the contract manufacturing work order, which will eventually be sent to your contract manufacturer, and then contract manufacturer will manufacture the goods or product. And you can request your contract manufacturer to send that goods or material to your customer if it is B2B scenario, that is back-to-back contract manufacturing. We support back-to-back contract manufacturing flow. If your planning has triggered the contract manufacturing, you can get it into your warehouse. So there are various entities which you can model using contract manufacturing flow. We'll talk about all of this. So we kind of support make to stock and make to order capabilities. And using the contract manufacturing solution, you as an OEM has a flexibility to replicate what is happening within the contract manufacturing organization. So where are we in terms of manufacturing, what operation is completed, what are the resources consumed, and so on. You can replicate it, and you can replicate it by creating an organization which is classified as the external. We call it as contract manufacturer virtual organization. So within your enterprise, you can create an organization which will be a virtual organization which resembles the operations of your contract manufacturer. So you have got all of these flows. All right. Any questions before we proceed? Will you cover intercompany as well? No, I think I would probably defer this question because Srini has something to say about intercompany in terms of supply chain financial orchestration is one, and within the internal material transfer. So hopefully you'll get that flow. Does it mean EBS inter-org transfer is compromised with IMT? You have got inter-org transfer as well, but you have IMT. And then the significance of both would be discussed within the internal material transfer session, which is scheduled for tomorrow. For our case, we have demand in organization A for an item and want to trigger internal order for item B. How it can be created? Will this be need planning central or can be triggered using alternate means? It depends, Kirtikar. First and foremost is you would go configure your global order promising, and within that you will have your sourcing rule, ATP rule. Within the sourcing rule, you will identify how you want to source if you have demand within certain warehouse. And if you think that it will be internal material transfer, for example, you created an order and that order is it's a back-to-back order, meaning you don't make the supply available till the time you have demand. And in this case, you want to fulfill the demand by internal material transfer the material from organization A or organization B to organization A and then fulfill. In this case, your GOP would work. If it is planning central, planning will have forecast. You enter your forecast and planning would generate you certain orders, and one of the entity is your transfer order, which is nothing but the IMT, internal material transfer. So planning would recommend that, hey, based on this forecast, we recommend you to transfer these goods from this warehouse to this warehouse. So you could use that. Can we have partial manufacturing, contract manufacturing? Ram, we are getting OSP really quick. I think in release 13, don't quote me. But yes, so if you are implementing, let's say release 11 or release 12, and I think your question is more towards OSP. So what you can do is you can model the entity, which we will discuss tomorrow. You may be confused a little bit now because we just had an overview, but tomorrow you would know more detail about contract manufacturing, how we model the entities. So what you can do is you can outsource to the contract manufacturer, and you would outsource as a product. It could be certain operations you have outsourced. You can model it that way. But that certain operation is the entire product. You can categorize that into your supply chain and then use it as partial contract manufacturing. But OSP is more formal way of handling your requirement. You could do that. Okay. All right. So about the pace, somebody commented that it's okay for them, and he wants me to continue the same. I will do that, and I'll take your question as we proceed further And I'm not answering some of your questions intentionally because Srini has a lot more to say about it. So keep your questions related to IMT and dropship for today and IMT for tomorrow. You'll get all of your questions. Re-raise those questions in that workshop. All right, let's get going about the supply chain orchestration. So I have a separate presentation to talk about supply chain orchestration. Let's go over that really quick. All right, so supply chain orchestration, it's a new product which we have introduced in release 11, and the subscription is when you subscribe supply chain and materials management, you would get it automatically. So there is no separate subscription required for supply chain orchestration. And we will talk about the capabilities of supply chain orchestration. I will take one of the flows. I'll probably pick the back-to-back item creation, and then I'll raise a sales order which is categorized back-to-back and by, and then I'll show you how supply chain orchestration would help us to manage our supply creation. So we'll talk about end-to-end flow in context of supply chain orchestration. And we'll talk about the change management capabilities within the supply chain orchestration. So from the supply chain orchestration standpoint, and you can call it as SEO because you may be hearing many abbreviations as we go along. So SEO is one of them, SFO is another one. So if somebody says SEO, it is supply chain orchestration. So supply chain orchestration is a product designed to execute and manage complex cross-product business processes such as contract manufacturing, back-to-back fulfillment. Its functional capabilities can be organized into 4 groups. It takes the request. It takes the request to create a supply from various fusion systems. And those fusion systems could be your planning central. It could be global order promising. It could be FOM. It could be inventory. And then it launches and manages the complex supply creation business processes to create the supply in the warehouse. And using that warehouse, you will fill the demand. The supply chain orchestration, it creates the supply in the warehouse that will eventually ship it to your customer. Right? So SEO, it takes the input, it launches and manages the complex business processes, and then create the supply. How it is creating the supply? It is through a purchase order, it is through manufacturing, it is through inventory. We'll talk about all of this. Basically, these are the execution layer which supply chain orchestration would invoke and create the execution document and then make the supply available. When your demand and supply is in sync, they could invariably change. And if there is change either in supply and demand, supply chain orchestration would acknowledge that change. And what it does, it provides you a capability where you can do the automatic change management. When I say you, as in supply chain orchestration can do automatic change management. For instance, you raise the purchase order and quantity 10, and supplier has got a constraint. Supplier has a constraint, and supplier says that hey, I am not going to provide you 10, I can provide you 5. And then as soon as those changes are done within the supply side, supply chain orchestration would acknowledge those changes, and supply chain orchestration would try and create the alternate source of supply. Supply chain orchestration could go into global order promising and then look at the sourcing rule and then say, what is the rank 2 of getting my supply created? Pick that supplier and then try and raise another purchase order, and then make sure that your supply is available in the same warehouse and the same scheduled ship date. If that is possible, then supply chain orchestration would create the alternate source of supply, and you as an order entry specialist need not to know from where the supply is getting created. So supply chain orchestration has a capability to manage your changes automatically. It has another capability in terms of giving you the visibility on what's going on. So it provides 360-degree view of supply creation processes. It gives you the visibility into the progress of supply that is being created and relationship between various documents. And those documents, we'll talk about it. In supply chain orchestration, you would be able to see various documents. In back-to-back, I talked about like a purchase order. It would eventually be created from the requisitions. And then in back-to-back, you have got reservations. So all of these are documents, and then you would be able to see various relationship between the documents. And while supply chain orchestration maintains the relationship between various documents, it is maintained through sales order, which is source of demand, and various execution document. And this is the capability of supply chain orchestration. So the benefit of supply chain orchestration is it allows the enterprise to select most effective supply creation processes. Most effective, the same item you may have flexibility to buy or make with in-house, or you do a contract manufacturing. So based on the rules which you have set up, supply chain orchestration would allow enterprise to select most effective supply creation processes. It reduces the capital investment and on-hand inventory. You need not to maintain a stock whatsoever. As soon as you get the demand, you create a supply. And it enables the contract manufacturer into their organization, which will allow the broader range of product, and which will eventually be more cost effective. You can have various negotiation with your contract manufacturer, and then based on those negotiations, it will be cost effective also. And all of these are rule based, and since they are all rule based, they are automatic, and less manual interventions are required. So this is the supply chain orchestration. So I would probably ask you a few questions about supply chain orchestration. Do you have any question on supply chain orchestration at a high level? What supply chain orchestration does? Does this processes support change management, for instance, customer demand change and supply changes? It is a yes, Nitin. We do support the changes, and those changes are automatic. Some of those changes you would see that they are automatic. Some of those changes may need the manual intervention. Let's say you changed, or your supplier changed the supply document, meaning you requested it today. He said, I cannot give it today, I can provide it tomorrow. And then in this case, supply chain orchestration may ask you to take certain manual action, and manual action could be go talk to your supplier and see what's going on. So you can do all of this. And to answer your question, yes, change management is possible, and that is again one of the selling point here, and it's key for supply chain orchestration. So this presentation is kind of redundant, and it is by design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it very simple, and try and give you the overview, and try and not to repeat it. I'll ask you guys to probably go over PowerPoint presentation and look at the technical aspect and then functional aspect. So let me present you the supply chain orchestration from the functional standpoint. So the supply creation process would start from the supply request, basically the demand. You get the demand, and then that would eventually be your supply request. So SCO processes starts on receiving the supply request. So first and foremost thing is supply request could be from various sources, which we have seen. It could be distributed order orchestration, it could be from planning, it could be from inventory, and so on. So as soon as you get the request, SCO will start its process. You have got planning, global order promising, and for that matter, it will be from internal material transfer, and then internal material transfer could be from spreadsheet upload as well. Once we get the request, you would eventually be able to do various other activities. So once we get the request, you'll have to identify how you are going to fulfill that. and it will eventually be the determination of supply process to use. There are various seeded supply processes. So all of these are seeded. I talked about back-to-back. I talked about contract manufacturing, and then various other we will see as we go along. So all of these are seeded ones. So when you get the request, let's say you got the request from planning. Planning, it looks at various attributes. It looks at various information. It collects the data basically, and then based on the collection, it would recommend you something. And the recommendation is go ahead and buy something from supplier. So the supplier ID which planning uses, and planning uses for internal purpose, and that supplier ID may need a transformation so that your execution system would understand what that supplier ID, because supplier ID could be different within the planning, and then you need a certain transformation to transfer that supplier ID into a supplier ID which your execution system understand, in this case purchasing understand. So certain transformations are required, and then that transformation would happen into supply chain orchestration. And as soon as you get the supply request, you would eventually identify whether you want to transfer the material, and if you want to transfer the material, how you want to transfer. So evaluation rule, or the execution rule for that matter, it is a OBR rule. We use it into internal material transfer, and then this execution rule says that you want to track the internal material using the entity called transfer order or the purchase order. By default, out of box, it is the transfer order. So transfer order is the entity which will be visible into your source organization and the destination organization, and whatever is the transfer which is happening, it will be through a transfer order, and you have flexibility to make that transfer through a purchase order. So if you want it through purchase order, it could be beyond the legal boundaries. So by the way, when you transfer the material, what system doesn't care is whether or not you are crossing the legal boundaries. It just says that you transfer from this warehouse to the other warehouse, and you want this transfer to be done through the purchase order. You could write it a rule called OBR, and then you route that transfer using purchase order. So that is something called execution rule. Out of box, it is transfer order. So another entity in internal material transfer is the enrichment rule. If you want the visibility of internal demand, let's say you are the order entry fulfillment manager, or the fulfillment manager in an organization from where you want to ship it, and you want the visibility of internal demands. So that order entry specialist or the fulfillment manager would have demands, and demands could be internal or external demands like sales order. If you want the visibility of internal demands, you can write an enrichment rule which will eventually give the visibility of internal demands to the fulfillment manager. So that's something which you'll have to configure. Again, OBR rule. Srini has some of the OBR rules configured. So when you talk about IMT tomorrow, he will show you some of those OBR rules. And once all of these transformations are done, once you execute all your execution rules and enrichment rule, supply chain orchestration would assign and launch appropriate supply creation processes. What it does is, like, it honors the pegging by global order promising, and then global order promising would eventually go to your sourcing rule, ATP rule, and then identify how you want to create. And based on that input, supply chain orchestration would assign and launch the appropriate supply creation processes. And those appropriate processes are seeded processes. You assign any one of the processes based on attributes, which we get it from GOP. Once these processes are assigned, you'll have to execute those predefined processes, meaning processes could be, let's say, requisition creation, right? So within your enterprise, you would know that requisition creation takes 1 day. Process could be purchase order creation. It could take 1 more day. You could have receipts or delivery or put away. It may take 10 days, so on and so forth. So all of these are called process plan. So supply chain orchestration would eventually help you to manage your process plan. And along with that, it will go talk to the execution system in terms of identifying and responding to the changes in supply and demand, and overall progress tracking. Overall progress tracking is nothing but the 360-degree view of your supply creation processes. So you got the demand. As soon as you got the demand, order entry specialist would have visibility in what's happening in terms of making the supply available. Where is my supply lying? So you have got all of these, and another layer called functional layer called execution layer eventually help you to manage that. And at the end, you would go interact with the execution system. So using the supply chain orchestration, you would have the process plan. One of the processes requisition created, you will get the requisition number. Another process plan would be your purchase order creation. You will get the purchase order. So all of these are within the supply chain orchestration. So if you go to the supply chain orchestration, you would know what is the execution system which is trying to make the supply available. It could be your manufacturing, it could be your purchasing system, and so on, or it could be inventory on hand, for that matter. So it kind of executes or build the target specific payload and execute those payloads. And payloads are nothing but the APIs. You pass the information, and the API will create the execution document in various execution system, and then transfer that information back, or the execution document information back to the supply chain orchestration. And we have a drill down capability. Let's say you are trying to make the supply available using purchase order. You can go to the purchase order through the supply chain orchestration directly and see what's going on. So that's your interaction layer with the execution system. So from the supply chain orchestration business process flow standpoint, we support various flows. We support plan to produce contract manufacturing. We support back-to-back contract manufacturing. We support back-to-back in-house manufacturing. We support back-to-back purchasing, that is back-to-back buy, transfer, and make. So we have got back-to-back buy, make, and transfer. So all of these flows are supported using supply chain orchestration. And within that list, if you see, there is no dropship. So dropship flow is different than dropship flow doesn't use supply chain orchestration product. And you will see tomorrow that there is something different in dropship than various other flows, which we will talk. So when I execute certain flows, it could be make to stack contract manufacturing, or it could be back-to-back buy processes. I would have certain things in mind, and there are certain things which supply chain orchestration would help us to manage. So if it is make to stock contract manufacturing processes, within the contract manufacturing processes, we create a work order and a purchase order pair. And then we send that purchase order to the contract manufacturer, and then that would be the triggering point to the contract manufacturer to start manufacturing the product or good. While this contract manufacturer is manufacturing something, there are certain operations, and the operation could be your count point operations, and they are nothing but the milestone operation, and you would need the progress of all of these milestone operations. And what you do is, you as an OEM, you can keep track of all those operations within your enterprise using that work order. So the work order and a purchase order pair, purchase order will be sent to a contract manufacturer, which will be the triggering point, and you use this work order for your purposes, so that you can keep track of what's happening within the contract manufacturer's facility. So you have got an external entity which is created within your enterprise, external organization. So when you create an organization, you have a classification called internal or external. You classify that as external, and then you specify that as the contract manufacturing organization. And when you specify that contract manufacturing organization, you specify that supplier as your contract manufacturer. And then as soon as you get the progress, you go update your work order. And when the work order is completed within the contract manufacturer's facility, you would get a progress, and then when you complete this work order, you receive that purchase order automatically. And you can do a put away, meaning you ask your contract manufacturer to ship it to your warehouse, and you send all of this information to costing, and we will see that starting day 3. So all these activities within the contract manufacturing is done by supply chain orchestration. So SCA would create a work order and a purchase order, and SCA would eventually help you to manage all of this. So it will help you to manage purchase order receipts, and work order completion would be handled by manufacturing and so on. So all of this will be done through supply chain orchestration. Same is the case with back-to-back buy processes. When it is a back-to-back buy, as soon as you get the demand, you would have your GOP, and GOP would pick the information to supply chain orchestration. Supply chain orchestration would start create a purchase order. It will be through requisitions, and then a purchase order will be created. Once the purchase order is created, there will be a reservations link between the sales order and the purchase order. So it will eventually have your reservations task created, and then as soon as you have reservations done, you have flexibility to manage the supply and demand. Let's say there is a long lead time, and then there are chances that supply or demand could change, and then all of these changes needs to be handled automatically. We as a supply chain orchestration product handle it automatically, and as soon as you receive it, you honor those receipts, and then eventually ship the sales order. So all of this activity within the back-to-back processes would be done by supply chain orchestration. So from the processes standpoint, you would have your order enter, like you get the customer order, an order entry specialist would enter the order within the order management application. And as soon as you click on submit button within the order management, it will call GOP, and it will schedule your order. Scheduling is nothing but from which warehouse you want to ship it and what would be your scheduled ship date. GOP will identify all of this and ship or schedule that order, and as soon as the order is scheduled, you will see from which warehouse and on which date. Another activity of global order promising is to send that supply recommendation to the supply chain orchestration. Supply chain orchestration needs a visibility into the demand. It needs the visibility into supply recommendation. So supply recommendation would come from global order promising, and demand picture would come from order management. So keep this in mind, because to get this information, we need to run a ESS job, and that you can schedule it. So the release planning recommendation is the ESS job, which will pull the supply recommendations from our global order promising to supply chain orchestration. So in supply chain orchestration, as I said, the supply chain orchestration is a product which we have designed to manage various complex and cross-product business processes. So we have got a demand picture, we have got a supply picture, right? So as a supply chain orchestration, since it is a product, it creates the supply order, because we want to tie various entities together, and then we have seen the entities in previous slide that it creates a work order, purchase order. If it is back-to-back buy, it creates the purchase order reservation. So we need to tie all of these entities together, and we tie it through the entity called supply order. Don't get confused with the order, sales order number and the supply order number. Supply order number is in context of supply chain orchestration. So in supply chain orchestration, you would use the supply order to drill through and look at various information. So it's the entity which tie all of these business objects together. So it creates the supply order, and as soon as it creates the supply order, it sends the PO request to the procurement, because we are talking about back-to-back procurement process or back-to-back buy process. So these processes are seeded processes. Supply chain orchestration would invoke those processes, and one of the activity within that process is send the request to procurement to create a purchase order. So it builds the payload here, and then payload is nothing but the API. It passes all of this information, and then the API will go create the purchase order within the procurement system. First, it creates the purchase requisitions, and if you want automatic purchase order creation, you can have your agreement set up. And within that, using that agreement, you have flexibility to create the purchase order automatically. Once you have your purchase order created, that purchase order number will come back to supply chain orchestration. It will sit in supply order. So there is a place where you can look at the execution documents. So as soon as you get that purchase order created, another payload will be called, and it says that do a reservation. Send the reservation request to inventory or logistics, and within the inventory you would be able to see that the sales order is reserved against this purchase order. So all these which are in pink color would be done by supply chain orchestration, or supply orchestration, you can say. And once the reservation is done, then a typical receipt would come into, and then as soon as you have received, your reservation will change between the purchase order and sales order to the sales order and the on hand, because we have got receipt and we have on hand now. Using that, you have greater control in terms of how your supply is getting created and whether or not it is getting misallocated. But there are warehouse operators who are armed with breaking the reservation and then allocate that supply to some other order. They have that capability, but out of box, we do a reservation automatically, and we change the reservation between on hand and purchase documents. And as soon as you have on hand, you can eventually go ship it to the customer. So whatever is done in pink is done through the supply chain orchestration. So we make the supply available using supply chain orchestration, and there could be various processes. As I mentioned, that you could have back-to-back buy, it will be different process. It could be back-to-back contract manufacturing, it could be different process. It could be back-to-back in-house manufacturing, it could be different process. So buy, make, transfer, all of this would handled by supply chain orchestration, but the processes are different. If it is contract manufacturing, you would execute and launch a different process, and those processes would eventually create the work order and a purchase order pair. If it is back-to-back buy, it will create a purchase order, requisitions, and a reservation. So you initiate a supply creation, or you book the demand, and then as soon as it comes to the supply chain orchestration will identify which predefined process to launch, and then make the supply available. And all of these are rule-based. You write a rule in sourcing rule, ATP rule, and then GOP would use those rules and pick that information to supply chain orchestration. Based on the input which we get into supply chain orchestration, SCM would assign and launch various different processes, and these are all seeded processes. All right, any questions before we proceed on change management? Do you have a view on Lockfire as an execution system, how closely it will be integrated? I think we acquired Lockfire, and it will be integrated. Ask this question to the manufacturing guys. Roman, you'll have to send an email to oracle_dub@oracle.com. What happens first, orchestration or promising? How do we remain in sync? It will be promising meaning scheduling of the order, and that schedule information will be sent to the supply chain orchestration, and then orchestration would come into picture. So basically, when you book the order and click on schedule, it will go to global order promising, look at the ATP rule if it is on hand. If the on hand is available, it will be reserved against the on hand. If not, then it will go look at the sourcing rule for that item, and then you'll have global sourcing rule and then local sourcing rule, and identify which one to execute. And that would be your input to the supply chain orchestration, and then supply chain orchestration would launch those processes, and it will be in sync. But from the synchronization standpoint, what I sense is how you synchronize your demand and supply. If there are any changes, how you manage it. All of this through the supply chain orchestration. If there is a demand, if the change in demand, it will be in order management, and you would automatically call the global order promising, and then global order promising feed that information to supply chain orchestration, and then supply chain orchestration would know that there are certain automatic change management which is needed. It will go look at the alternate source of supply, for instance, and then try and create the alternate source of supply if required. There used to be a combined back-to-back and dropship scenario. Is it still supported in cloud? Prakash, we support dropship, we support back-to-back, and we will see how we can combine it. Anshul has a question. Does it also helps in balancing assembly line? Anshul, when you put the question next time, please give me the context, because I may not be reading your question whenever I discuss something. So now I don't know the context when you say assembly line. All right, let's get going. So from the change management standpoint, automatic change management is one of the key features in supply chain orchestration. If there is a timeline between demand and supply, then there is a possibility that there is a change in either demand or supply. And you as an optimization enterprise, you may not want to create the excess supply, or you may not want to shortfall of the supply, and SCM will eventually provide you an automatic mechanism in terms of how you want to manage those changes. And then changes could be supply side changes, and it could be demand side changes. Supply side changes could be your increase or decrease of supply quantity. Your supplier says that I'm not going to give you this quantity, I'm going to decrease it. You could have supply order cancellation at all, like supplier says that I got a constraint, I'm not going to fulfill that, it will be a PO cancellation in that case, or work order cancellation if manufacturing facility has a constraint. It could be date related change. PO date is extended by your supplier, says that I'm not going to fulfill that on this date, you will get it later, or maybe a day or two. So all of these are supply side changes. And one of the other supply side changes is like you can have a split into PO. Maybe you order for, let's say, 10 quantities. Supplier says that I'm going to provide you 7 now and 3 later, and so on. So all of these are supply side changes. You could see it here. If this is a split, you'll have to deal with the situation, meaning when your supplier splits the schedule, that information will come to supply chain orchestration, and supply chain orchestration would identify there is a mismatch, demand and a supply. And in this case, the response of supply chain orchestration depends on the process and type of change which you do. Like in this case, it is back-to-back purchase order, and there is eventually a reduction in the quantity. So what supply chain orchestration does is it calls the automatic change management, and when it calls the automatic change management, it finds the alternate source of supply. When it finds the alternate source of supply, supply chain orchestration will make sure that you are getting the supply on time, the requested ship date, and you are getting it into the same warehouse. If that is possible, then supply chain orchestration would create another purchase order or requisition in this case, and it will be on the other supplier. Again, all of these are set up. You go to sourcing rule, you have your ranks, and then figure out how you want to configure, and then supply chain orchestration would take that as the input and try and find the alternate source of supply, and then create a purchase order. So this is change management, and which is automatic. There could be demand side changes. You have got cancel in demand. Your customer says that, hey, I don't want it. As soon as sales cancel, there is a cancellation in demand. We'll have to um, again, send that information to supply orchestration, because supply orchestration is responsible for managing or making the supply available within the warehouse. So you don't want the supply, because if you still get a supply, it will be excess of supply in your organization, and we don't want that. It could be increase or decrease in the quantity. If it is increase in the quantity, we would go automatically change the purchase order quantity, and then let supplier acknowledge it. And if there are any changes from the supplier side, also we acknowledge it. It could be change in the need my date. You can raise the purchase order letter, which you need it, let's say end of this month, and then later you got the urgent requirement and you say, hey, I want it maybe this week. You go ahead and change it, and then all of these changes would be managed by supply chain orchestration automatically. It finds the alternate source of supply if required. So this is your supply chain orchestration. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the product and see how that supply chain orchestration looks like. So I logged in as supply chain instructor. You can log in as SCM_student, and it will take you to a home page. Will also cancel supplies in case of demand change. Yes. All right. So let's now you logged in as logged in as a user, and then what you do is you can go over supply orchestration, and I'll show you UI supply chain orchestration. And by the way, you can go over this UI whenever you execute the flows. It could be back to back, buy, make, transfer, and then in all of those flows you would see this UI. So supply chain orchestration work area is designed as management by exception, and you see that supply line overview is the landing page in this work area, and it displays the supply lines aggregated and grouped, and it will be grouped by error. Supply lines, like you get the input into the supply chain orchestration, and based on the input you would have your supply order created. So those inputs could have errors, and this is the dashboard or landing page, which is design management by exception. If there are any errors, you'll be able to see it here. So all these lines, supply lines, are grouped by errors, exception, jeopardy, whether or not it is on track. It is grouped by item. It is grouped by the supply type, whether or not you are trying to buy it, make it, or transfer it. So you would see this grouping here, and what you can do is and all of these are dealable. You can see that there are certain jeopardy within the buy. There are 6 jeopardies. So what do you mean by error? Error is nothing but the technical or functional error which is preventing from getting executed, like the supply lines getting executed. Exceptions are temporary. Most of the time it would be temporary, meaning there are certain changes which have happened, either demand or supply, and you are trying to balance that using automatic change management. So you would see exception for fraction of seconds or minutes, whatever is the time, and so supply chain orchestration would automatically try and identify those exceptions and then resolve those exceptions. Jeopardy, meaning you did not get your supply on need by date. Like you raised the purchase order, and your supplier did not say that there is a constraint and he or she will not be able to supply it, but you do not have supplies yet. So that would be a jeopardy. Exceptions, like they said that we are not going to give you, and you will identify the alternate source of supply and then create another purchase order, and meanwhile you will get exception here. You can go drill down. You can go to errors and exceptions and jeopardy. Since there is a jeopardy here, let me click on here and then see how many 6 lines are in jeopardy. So by the way, these lines, under lines you can view the line errors and messages. Currently there are no messages, so you'll not be able to figure it out what's actually going on here. You'll be able to see the supply order, and this is the entity which will hold all of this information. Within the supply chain orchestration, this is the main entity which holds various business objects. So you would be able to see the supply line by the supply order number. You would be able to see what's your purchase order, what's happening. It says that awaiting receipt. So by now you would be able to make it out that it is awaiting receipt, meaning you have not done the receipts yet, and that's the reason it is in jeopardy. But you would get the error message here. If you think that this error message is sufficient for you, and you can figure it out whether if there are any recoverable error, for instance, here, and you go fix those error and resubmit it, so that you would get your supply lines processed. Or you can mark it as inactive, meaning you don't need it anymore. But in most of the cases, you may not get as much information as you want within the supply line details, supply lines. So what you do is you go to supply order detail, and when you click on the supply order number, it will take you to a supply order detail. So within that supply order detail, you'll be able to see various structures. You'll be able to see the progress of the orchestration process down below, and you'll be able to identify if there are any changes. So this is your demand line, and demand says that I need 10 quantities, and then 10 quantities you are going to buy it from this guy, or sorry, buy it from. Okay, I can go add supplier in if it is not available, or you may be able to see it under purchase order. So this is the customer order, and it says that buy this item, this quantity, and these are all your supply picture. So what happens is, you are getting 7 quantities from this supplier, meaning I can go look at the purchase order and identify the supplier, and 3 quantity from different supplier. Reason behind that is, you got the supplier constraint here, says that I can produce 7 and 3. We automatically, as part of change management, we try to get it here. So since the lines are in jeopardy, reason behind that it is awaiting receipt, and then I can see that you did not do a delivery or put away, meaning you did not receive those goods yet. And what you can do is, within the supply chain orchestration, there is a plan. I said that, start date and end date and so on. You could see the execution document, and these execution documents are nothing but your purchase order, requisitions, and the resolution. You could go over buy. If there are any buy documents, you can go look at those buy documents, and you can drill from this UI. So this is purchase order. If you click on this purchase order hyperlink, it will take you to a UI where you'll be able to look at your purchase order. So at the end, what happens is, you go receive it, and then as soon as you receive it, you'll be able to see that the supply is available within the warehouse, and then you go ship that to your customer. So this is how you would go look at this purchase order from this UI. And same is the case with make item. If there is in make item, you'll be able to see it here, and if it is transfer, you'll be able to see it here. So you'll be able to get all of this. You'll be able to see this information. You, as an order entry specialist or order fulfillment manager, you can go to your supply line, you can go to the supply chain orchestration details, and within that detail, you'll be able to see how you are going to make the supply available within the warehouse. And it says that it is buy, you are going to get it through this purchase order, and you have flexibility to look at who is the buyer, and then go talk to buyer and say why supply is not yet available. It says that it is needed on 22nd February. It is already 20th March. It is 28 days delayed. And then you can take action. So the change management, this is as part of change management, and I think you have hands-on activity to do it. But if I get a time, I'll probably show you the change management capability as well. So there are various search capabilities. You can go look at all the supply lines here, or you can go over the find button and then look at your sales order. You can go pull the sales order and click on search. It will give you the sales order, and then you can go look at all of the sales supply orders. So for the sales order, there are a couple of supply order number. You have a flexibility to look at the lines which are pending into interface table. Meaning you have got supply chain orchestration interface table. And, inputs or requests would come to interface, and then you process those to the base tables. And if there are any exception within the interface table, you'll be able to look at all of these and then say cancel request or resubmit. Basically, you go fix those errors and then say resubmit. Your lines will be processed, and if not, then just say cancel the request. Any question before we proceed further? Okay. Is SEO similar to what we have transaction open interface in EBS? I'm not from EBS background, Ashish, so I would not know. But the SEO is something we take the input and then we make the supply available using supply chain orchestration. So there could be various orchestration, and I think I may have a slide which will talk about it. You could have order orchestration who is responsible for managing the order starting from request of the order till the shipment and close out the order. Supply chain orchestration is responsible for making the supplies available, and you're done. As soon as you have supply available, the action of supply chain orchestration is done, and then order orchestration process would trigger, and then it will do a shipment and then billing and so on. If a planning recommendation is successfully submitted as a purchase order, requisition, or work order from Planning Central, can I see it here? Yes, you can see that, because as I said that we support planning scenario as well in supply chain orchestration. How does SEO know the B2B procurement process is make item, or it is based on the item attribute? It would be on the item attribute is one, because first and foremost thing is your item attribute, it should be back to back. It's one. And if it is make, it should be make. And if it is buy, it should be buy. And another entity is your sourcing rule in GOP. We'll go over all of this setup as we go along with various other flows, like back to back. I'll talk about it now, and then contract manufacturing, I'll talk about it sometime tomorrow. The attribute and configurations. Issue is I am able to see only if there is an exception. I was not able to see in SEO if the planning recommendation was processed successfully in the training environment. I'm not sure, Sulabh, which training environment you are referring to, but you should be able to see it under supply line, or all of these are exceptions. If not, then you go over all your different UI where I did show you that how you can search your supply order. Is there any way you can bypass SEO in simple fulfillment cases like min-max to purchase order? If it is back-to-back min-max, we will eventually use it. And you could trigger minimax using those inventory min-max kind of configurations which you have. But I'm not so sure if you can bypass supply chain orchestration. maybe Prakash, you can put your question in the forum, and then I'll check if we can bypass. Anyways, we can bypass the supply chain orchestration. But some of the flows which don't use supply chain orchestration in dropship, anyways, you will not be able to use there. All right, so let's get going and see what's next. Okay, I think it's already 1.5 hours. I think we are talking. Let's take a 10 minutes break, and I will come back and talk about back to back. And I see that there are questions which are not answered. Please put them in the forum. So let me put a timer for 10 minutes. All right, welcome back. Let me see how many of you are back. 33% are looking at my screen now, and now 37. So looks like if your guys are able to hear me, get back to the WebEx screen so that we can go ahead and get started with the next topic. And I tried to respond some of your question during the break, and I'll continue to do it when Srini comes back and talks about dropship. Some of your questions are related to planning. So there is another workshop. If you are not probably keen to attend that, there is a forum. If not, then you may have to give me more information in terms of what you are trying to achieve. And then I'll try and see if I can respond to your questions. Okay, so 44% of you are back, so decent participants. So I'll go ahead and get started with next topic called. And by the way, I will have you guys to go over some of these setups of supply chain orchestration. There are not many setup in supply chain orchestration. If you look at it, there is lookup, which is serial lookup. If you want any additional information to put it, you can go look at it. Attachment categories you may not need because you can use the existing attachment categories. Execution document creation rule or the execution rule, you may not need it because by default IMT will be routed through the transfer order unless you need it through purchase order. And if you are crossing the legal boundaries, then you need that rule to be created. That is again OBR rule. And enrichment rule, if you want to give the visibility of internal orders to the order fulfillment manager, go ahead and configure it. If not, then just leave it. So these are the setups which are needed into supply chain orchestration, and something which you can go over that PowerPoint presentation and see. But that's something which there are minimum setups which are needed. So next topic is the back-to-back supply creation and fulfillment. And I'm going to give you one demo here. I'll try and use an item which is kind of configured as back-to-back buy, and then I'll show you how supply chain orchestration would help you to manage all of this. In this session, I'll try and explain you the purpose and benefits of back-to-back fulfillment and various other capabilities around back-to-back. We can support back-to-back buy, make, transfer, and if it is on hand, we'll go ahead and reserve the on hand against the demand. So from the back-to-back supply creation processes, as I mentioned that a specific sales order demand triggers the supply creation. And as soon as you have supply document created, you have a firm link established between the sales order, which is a demand source, and supply document. The potential documents that are generated, it could be purchase order, and you may want it sourced through the external supplier. It could be work order. You can make item and you can make it into manufacturing facility, or you could do it into contract manufacturing facility. Just give me 1 minute, guys. Yeah, apologize for that disturbance. You could have your work order, you could have your transfer order, and you could, for that matter, reserve your on hand. So what we do is we go look at the ATP rule, and if there are any on hand, we consume the on hand, and if not, then we'll go to sourcing rule and try and see whether to source it from external supplier, source it through the manufacturing facility, or source it through the transfer order. You start with the sales order and then identify the supply source. You receive the supplies and then consolidate them into the order fulfillment or the fulfillment warehouse, and eventually ship it to the customer. This is something which we try to bring it in release 11. So certain setups which you guys are interested in, item must be flagged as back to back. So in supply chain foundation, you might have seen that in product hub or product model, you go define your item, and within the item specification there are sales order specifications where you can go specify that this item is the back to back item. Along with that, you would have your sourcing rule and ATP rule. So from the processes standpoint, supply chain orchestration, we talked about supply chain orchestration in earlier session, and then the supply chain orchestration would help you to make the supply available into the internal warehouse. So the responsibility of supply orchestration is to make the supply available. And the responsibility of order orchestration is like end to end. You have your orchestration process, and then orchestration process would request the supply creation. And as soon as orchestration process requests the supply creation, supply chain orchestration process would kick in, and then it will make the supply available. And as soon as supply is available, the next process within the orchestration process would eventually be ship. Go ahead and ship it, and then do a billing. So order orchestration process, it is responsible for end-to-end customer delivery. All right, and how the fulfillment process is selected. So if it is a standard order, and whenever I say the scheduling result, it is nothing but the global order promising. It will go look at the rules which are defined into GOP. It could be ATP rule, sourcing rule, and this sourcing rule would know whether or not you want to fulfill it using the internal warehouse, or it could be supplier, or it could be external warehouse. So if the scheduling result is internal warehouse and back to back flag is no, then it is a standard order. All right, if it is a standard order, you would go reserve the on hand and you are done. If the scheduling result is supplier, meaning you have your dropship item, and then dropship item in sourcing rule, it says that go ahead and procure it from the supplier, and it is not a back-to-back item, then it will be a dropship flow. Another flow is back-to-back, where it says that it is a back-to-back item, and the fulfillment warehouse or the scheduling result is the internal warehouse. So it will say, go ahead and use the back-to-back flow. So these are various flows which you would go pick based on the attributes and then the configurations which are defined in sourcing rules. So from the order fulfillment processes, you have a standard order, meaning you go reserve the on hand, ship, and invoice. You are done. You could have dropship, meaning you whenever you schedule the dropship order, it will create a purchase order, requisitions and order, purchase order, and purchase order would know where to ship, and then it will ship to your customer. So your supplier will ship to your customer, that will be a dropship, and then you have your advance shipment notices, and it will eventually start your invoicing processes. Back to back is you get a supplier request. You book the order, and then within the order orchestration, you would see a process called supply request supply. And as soon as you have a request supply, you'll wait till the time supply is available. And this is where you would call supply chain orchestration to make the supply available. And I think in the standard order, you are not using the supply chain orchestration. So something which you may have to go look at into order to cash flow, where whether or not you are using it there. So as soon as you say that request supply, and then you would eventually have your supplier, supply chain orchestration created. Supply chain orchestration would make the supply available. Till that time, your process will wait. And as soon as your supply is available, you will eventually ship and then do invoicing. So you've got fulfillment of standard item. Standard item means it is a document agnostic flow. It could be your work order, it could be your purchase order, it could be your transfer order. So, there are various, as I mentioned earlier, that, the back-to-back flow, it is highly integrated. It is integrated with various other Fusion applications. So you have got order management, you have got GOP, you have got supply orchestration, you have got various execution system, and so on. We go look at all of this. I mean, in order management, there are various activities which would be happening. You have your request for supply creation, meaning you have your demand. You raise the purchase, or you got the customer order, and you enter that as a sales order within your application, and that will be your triggering point where you want to create the supply. And this orchestration process within the order orchestration would wait till the time supply is available. So the next step is it will go to the order promising, global order promising. As soon as you submit the sales order, it will go call global order promising, and then global order promising would schedule that order. And then scheduling means nothing but it will go give you the warehouse from which you want to ship it, and the scheduled ship date. As soon as your order is scheduled, you would eventually run the release planning recommendation, which will send the planning recommendation from global order promising to the supply chain orchestration. So you will get the demand picture from order management, you will get the supply recommendation from global order promising, and then supply chain orchestration would use those input and create the supply order. And once the supply order is created, it will identify the predefined processes or the fulfillment processes, and it could be your manufacturing processes, could be procurement processes, could be inventory processes. And then you would eventually create those execution documents. And once the execution documents are created, you would go reserve those execution document against the sales order, against the demand. While the reservation is on, you would eventually get the supply within your inventory or the warehouse. And as soon as you have your supply available, you would go change the reservations. And when you change the reservation, this reservation will be between the on hand and sales order. And as soon as you have supply available, you will intimate the order entry specialist or the order management that there is supply available. And as soon as you have supply available, you will eventually ship it. So this is document agnostic flow, back to back. You could have back to back buy. In this case, you could create a purchase requisitions and the purchase order, and then this purchase order will be reserved, and then it will be reserved against the on hand. Excuse me. It will be reserved against the purchase order, and then once you have got on hand, you would eventually go ship it to your customer. From the make, you would create a purchase order, you would create a work order. You would have your supply payload, which will eventually call the manufacturing processes and create the work order. And once the work order is created, you would have your reservations between the work order and the sales order. You would wait till the time your manufacturing process is complete, and as soon as it is completed, you will have that item within your inventory, and then the reservation will be reservation will change from work order to supply order to on hand to the supply order, and you will eventually ship it to your customer. So it could be contract manufacturer. If it is contract manufacturer, it will be a different flow. I'll talk about that. If it is transfer, you're trying to transfer within the warehouses. Supply chain orchestration would create a transfer order, and then transfer order will be sent to inventory, and then inventory would know, or the logistic would know, that from which organization to which organizations, and then this reservation would be between the transfer order and the order management till the time the goods or materials are available in the destination warehouse, and then you would eventually ship it to the customer. So all of these would be through global order promising. The recommendation would come from global order promising, whether to make it, buy it, or transfer it. And all of these are rule based. You write your rules, and then you eventually identify whether to make it, transfer it, or buy it, and along with the item attribute for sure. You have got on hand, you will go look at this ATP rule, and then if the on hand is available, we consume the on hand, and then um, and then raise any other documents if needed. All right, from the benefit of back-to-back process standpoint, we talked about what back-to-back does, and customer typically use this fulfillment method when they either don't want to utilize the warehouse space to stock items that are really sell, the item which are high cost, therefore very expensive to maintain as an on-hand quantity. One of the classic example of back-to-back is specialized medical equipment, and some of the specialized medical equipment are very large and they could be very expensive to build. So it is not very practical to store it in warehouse and then eventually ship it to your customer. But from your business standpoint, you may want to give your customer an opportunity to procure those materials or buy it from you. So what you can do is you can extend your advanced fulfillment or extend your channel or expand your channel and give customer wide variety of products which they can buy from you. And what you can do is you can use a back-to-back buy kind of scenario to meet your customer's requirement. So what you do is you raise the sales order for those items with various other suppliers and then get it into your warehouse and then ship it. So there could be various reasons, and one of the reasons is this. So now let me do this. I will probably stop here in PowerPoint presentation and go to the application, and let's see if we can create an order and tie all of these discussions together. So I'll raise a order and then see what is the process which is assigned to our order. And I know that this item is categorized as back-to-back buy, and I'll show you the sourcing rule whenever I'm done with my demonstration and the process flows. You would know, yes, this is how you would go peg it. So I'll try and raise it to customer call computer services rental, and my recommendation is give this business unit first, and then it will automatically default all of this information. So select that item. And it will go to advanced pricing and then pick the price, and this price would be different than the purchase order price, and then whatever is the margin is your gross profit margin. And currently it says that it is out of stock. There is no out of stock. If it is out of stock, it will go look at the ATP and then reserve the on hand against this order. Since it is out of stock, we'll have to create the you'll have to make the supply available. And then how you can make the supply available, it is through the supply chain orchestration. So go add it to your cart, and there is a truck icon where you can specify when you want it. You can say I want it, let's say 24th I want, and the rest you can keep that as is. Like you can give the warehouse if you want, or if you don't want, you can just leave it blank, and then it will go look at the GOP configuration and it will figure it out from which warehouse you want to ship it. You can give it, or you'll take it from GOP. I need that sales order number, so I'll save it in a notepad, and then I'll submit it. As soon as I submit it, it will call GOP. And then GOP will schedule this order. When I say schedule, it will give the warehouse from which you want to ship, and it will give you the scheduled ship date. You give the requested date. Whether or not I am able to meet this requested ship date or not, it will be through the global order promising. And somebody pointed out that can we have constraint? Yes, you can go manually enter the constraint in planning, and then we use those constraints. Now it says that it is scheduled. I can go look at the fulfillment view. Click on switch to fulfillment view and go to lines, fulfillment lines. And within the fulfillment lines, you can go look at the supply details. Within the supply details, you would be able to see that it will be shipped through the warehouse called 003, and this was my requested ship date, and this is my scheduled ship date with GOP as pegged. So global order promising says that yes, I'm going to give you on the same date. So we are good. So now this is the global order promising, and then global order promising will have to send this information to supply chain orchestration so that we have the supply order number. Currently, if you see that there is no supply order number, there is no status, meaning you have not started creating the supply yet. Right. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to send this information. As I mentioned that a couple of times, that supply chain orchestration would need the information from order management, which is the demand picture. It needs the supply recommendation from global order promising. So this supply recommendation from global order promising would be passed on to the supply chain orchestration through a process called release planning recommendation. So you'll have to run a process called release planning recommendation. And on day 5, I have a plan to give you end-to-end flow in terms of how you can cost it, and then what is your profit margin percentage, and so on. So I would re-execute all of these flows, and then I will ask you questions: which ESS job I should run, what is the significance of all of these jobs, so that I'll just try and make sure that you guys got something out of this workshop. So keep this in mind. You can make a note of it, or you can go over your activity guides and pay little attention on what ESS job to run. And you may want it. You should know all of this ESS job upfront, because if you are trying to give a demo to your customer, you may ask your colleagues to run those ESS job behind the scene, or you can schedule it if you want. You may not be running it manually in front of them. So keep them handy, and then ask your colleague to do it for you. Maybe some of you may be from sales and then may not want to run this ESS job in front of your customer. So I'm running the release planning recommendation, which will eventually send the planning recommendations to global order promising, and it will create a supply order, and then supply order is the entity which will hold various other business objects. And then through the supply order, I can go to details and look at all the information which supply chain orchestration can help you to look at. All right, now my ESS job is completed. I should have my supply order number created. Let me requery my sales order. And I'll go over, switch to fulfillment mode, fulfillment lines. And if you see here under supply details, you would see a supply order number is created, and it says that awaiting supply. So now you have got a supply order number, and the status of the supply order is awaiting supply, and you would be able to see the status at any given point in time that we are waiting for this supply, and this supply order number is responsible for making your supply available, and this is your supply order detail. And we can go over supply chain orchestration overview page and then look at all of these supply order details. You can go query by a sales order. This is the request reference, and you will be able to see the demand picture. And demand is we need one quantity, and this is the demand, and this is the sales order. This is the supply picture. If you click on the supply line, you would be able to look at this orchestration plan, and within the orchestration plan, you have got various tasks. So requisition created. So it says that the progress of requisition created, it says that completed. If you go back to go to next step called execution document, you will be able to see that this is the requisition number which is created. All right, and you can it's a procurement functionality, by the way. You can go into purchasing and then create a blanket purchase agreement for this item, and say under controls tab you can specify that auto create purchase order, for these requisitions. If that setup is available, you will be able to auto create the purchase order on from this requisition. If not, then somebody will have to go manually create the purchase order, and as soon as purchase order is created, you will be able to see it under this orchestration plan. So currently the setup is in such a way that it is automatically purchase order creation, and since it is automatic purchase order creation, you would be able to go look at this execution document. So this is my purchase order which is created, and once the purchase order is created, there is a reservations. So if you go do a refresh again, you will be able to go look at this reservation. All right, so now I can go look at this purchase order. By the way, this drill capability takes a little bit time. I'm not so sure. I'm trying to figure it out why it takes a little bit of time, but if you can come back later and you'll be able to see that it is drillable. So I can go look at this purchase order. I have already a buyer logged in, so I can go over purchasing and show you the purchase order. It's not logged in. I'll go to procurement. Within purchasing, I'll be able to look at the purchase order. Can you show manual creation of purchase order? Will manual creation of PO trigger any SEO? SEO would not, manual creation of the PO would not trigger the SEO, but you could manually create the purchase order as soon as you have demand in sales order. So basically it will go through SEO, and SEO would create a requisition, and based on the requisition, if you want to create manual PO, you can go to purchasing, create the purchase order using that requisition, and then it will go back to SEO, and it will show you the purchase order created. It's not the other way around. Scheduling RAM is all planning questions, so it will be in sourcing rule, which probably look at various constraints which are available. All the planning, everything will be done in planning. So I would recommend you, because you have got many planning questions, I would recommend you to join the planning workshop. How to schedule a ESS job, I'll show that to you in a minute. So let me show you a purchase order. Okay. For automatic PO creation, do we need a setup with? Yes, it's an agreement. You'll be able to see a source agreement here. So if you look at, this is our purchase order. It is created through a source agreement, and you would be able to see additional information here under schedule. So there is an information icon. If you click on this information icon, it will say the schedule good are to fulfill the customer sales order. That means it is a back-to-back order. You have flexibility to look at various other attributes. You can go view the orders within the view area, and then there is a back-to-back flow, a back-to-back flag, and you could see that this order is a back-to-back order, meaning it will fulfill the customer demand. You can go look at the source agreement, and within the source agreement you have a setup called controls, and it says that automatic create purchase order. So if you see here under controls tab, it says that automatically generate the orders, and this is the setup which will automatically create the purchase order. So this is something which is set, and that's the reason you see that automatically purchase order is created. You could create a purchase order automatically, and then you can have approvals. But in a typical scenario, if something is coming from other system, that means it is pre-approved. You can specify that as auto-approved, or you could use approvals or BPM to configure the approvals. So you can do whatever ways you want. If you want greater control on a buyer's hand, you can ask them to create and send it for approvals. There was a question how we can schedule the ESS job. You can go to schedule processes and say schedule a new process. I'll try and pick the same process. Click on OK and go over Advanced tab. And under Advanced, you'll be able to see schedule. You can schedule as soon as possible or using a schedule. Click on using a schedule and specify your schedule. Okay, let's look at other setup like sourcing rule. Somebody is interested in understanding how we can set up the sourcing rule. Yeah, so we have seen a purchase order now. So let me show you the sourcing rule, and then we'll go over the reservation, because now we have got a purchase order created. We needed a reservation between the sales order and the purchase order. You go to value chain planning and order promising. Can the shortage of component in a work order creates a demand in SEO? No, as of now, no, we don't create that. We assume that you already have those components available. We don't create them. Yeah, planning does that for you if you want. In case of back-to-back transfer order, will the sales order reservation move to IMT? It will be transfer order. Prakash, not the IMT order. Yeah, so yeah, IMT order to on hand to pick wave. Yes, it does that all the way. What happens when work order needs component? Does it also use the supply orchestration? Basically, when you manufacture, when your order is let's say back-to-back make. We have ATP rule, and within that ATP rule, you would seek you have a checkbox called component availability. We look at it, but we don't stop you guys if there are no components available. We still go ahead and create the work order, and you will be able to release the work order. But all of these are again planning. You manage all your planning within the planning central. So let me go over manage assignment sets. And I'll search that assignment set. Again, there is a profile option which will specify which one is your default assignment set. And in this case, it is a global order promising. I can go look at my item. I can filter it out from item. So I know the item. And there are sourcing rules which are available. It says that item which is at a global level. It says that transfer from 003, it will go to 003 and then look at it. And it says that you source it from Midtown. B Midtown is your, I can say, your supplier. And it says this is how your sourcing rule would be. It says that buy from this supplier, and this is your rank, and this is 100% allocation. Since it is 100% in one, we'll go look at all this supplier and get it. You can have another rank, and then you have another supplier, and if this supplier has a supplier constraint, you go look at the rank to supplier and then find the alternate source of supply. So this is how your sourcing rule is defined. Okay, so can you also review the on hand, on the order, and its attribute? All right, so let's go to warehouse. (003) organization. Yeah, easiest way to look at whether or not on hand is available is whenever you book the order, you will say whether it is on stock or it is not on stock. Let's search it. I search it for on hand, and if there is no result, that means there is no on hand. I'll quickly show you the item attribute now. You would go to product management, product information management. All of these are covered in supply chain foundation course. At the time of return sales order, does SCO involve? No. SCO is responsible for making the supply available. Return sales order is a separate flow. Will the orchestration work multi-level? So for example, our rule says 002 is supplied from 003 and 003 we buy. Yes, you can do that. It's pretty common across all the stacks. Like you go to planning and you plan it that way. And the global order promising is the component from planning, and we use it. So you can have multi kind of sourcing rule, like transfer from this, and if there is now available in that source organization, you go buy it and then transfer. You can do that all. Would the orchestration create the transfer order and the purchase order? So Jason, by default, it will be a transfer order. And if you want the purchase order, if you are crossing the legal boundaries and you may want to document it using purchase order, you'll have to write a OBR rule, and OBR rule will eventually help you to manage the transfer by a purchase order. But by default, it will be a transfer order. It creates automatically. So look at the item in 003 organization. Yes, here you go. So I queried the item within 003 organization. I'll straight away go to the specification, and there should be a specification about sales and order management, and back-to-back enable is yes. So this is the flag which we look at, and it should be back-to-back buy. Yeah, purchasable. These are the attributes which you look at, and then this is the price which you would get it. Once you have this, it will create a requisition, and then requisition would know that there is agreement already with that customer for this item, it will go look at that agreement and then check whether or not automatically purchase order creation is enabled. I mean the item in the item master and the attribute required back to back. Yes. Okay. So that's what is Thomas. Can you also review the item on the order and its attribute? Okay, I think I did that already. Do we need planning for this automatic PO creation on the basis of sourcing rule, or it will work without the planning as well? It will work without the planning. I mean, so if you want only automatic creation of the purchase order, it will be through the blanket purchase agreement, and within that blanket purchase agreement you have controls tab where you can specify whether or not you want automatic purchase order creation. So creation of the purchase order doesn't need global order promising. Global order promising, you need it for recommendation. Please show me the sourcing rule against this agreement. Sourcing rule will not be against the agreement, it will be against the item. I did show that to you, Dilip. Okay, let's go back now. We have seen the purchase order. Next is the reservation. So you can go look at the reservation, and then reservation would be against the sales order. So you go to warehouse, and in inventory, you have got a option called manage reservations and pick. You could go give the inventory organization. You can specify a document type as sales order and give the sales order number. And then look at this reservation now. So you see that there is a reservation in 003. In 003, there is a reservation for this item. And within the sales order, there is order called 64. Let me see that. Yes, 64, and line is 1-1. So currently says that this sales order is reserved against this purchase order, and this is your purchase order number. If you want to look at it, just compare. It's 71 ends with 71. It says that it is back to back, and this demand is reserved against this supply, and so on. So you'll be able to see this reservation. So now, if you go back and look at our order, it says that it is awaiting supply, because we have not received it. So we can go look at the status of our order now. Because the reservation is done, next step is delivery or put away. You go receive it and then make the supply available within the warehouse. It says that this is order orchestration status. It says that awaiting shipping, but you want to go look at what's the exact status of your supply creation. You would know that supply creation is awaiting supply. It says that it is awaiting supply, and you can go look at why it is awaiting supply, where it is pending. It says that awaiting receipt. Right, so you can go do a receipt of this purchase order. So what I can do is now I can go back to the warehouse, and I receive that. Or before you receive it, let's say you probably want to do certain changes. I don't want to repeat the same flow for changes, and I may pick one of the flow like demand side change. So let's go back and try and see if we can actually communicate that information to the execution system. So it says that the requested ship date was 24th. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to maybe tomorrow. So I needed it on 24th, but I got urgent requirement. I need it by 21st or maybe 22nd. So what I can do is I can go edit or create revision. Just trying to create a revision. Go to this truck icon and say override order line. And when you override the order line, say I want it on 22nd. All right, and then say okay. You can save it. It says that there is a version created. Once you save it, you can go submit it. As soon as you submit it, it will go to GOP and then say, hey, this is what change is, whether or not you'll be able to fulfill on that time. And it will identify, the supplier constraints, and then look at all of this process plan and figure it out what should be your scheduled ship date. And then it says that it is awaiting shipping. It will put this line on hold. It says that it is processing, and now it is processing, and it kept it on hold. It will go process it and then figure it out if it's possible. It says that pendings are change pending. Keep refreshing it till the time you get that desired result. Can I break the B2B reservation and assign to different order? Yes, you can do that. But by default, we don't. Instead of receiving into warehouse, can the supplier directly send it to my customer? Yes, you can do that. You can do it through dropship. Because in dropship, the scheduling result is not the internal warehouse. It is the supplier. And you can ask your supplier to do it, and that will be a dropship flow, Ashish. So it says that it is scheduled. You can go look at what has scheduled by the supplier, GOP. You can go over fulfillment lines and go over supply details. And within the supply details, you will be able to see that requested ship date was changed to 22nd March, and then it has scheduled to 22nd March now. So we are good from the scheduling standpoint, but we'll have to communicate that to your supplier, because you already created a purchase order, and that needs to be sent back to the supplier that we have certain changes. And if you see here, your supply line is locked, meaning it is processing those changes. You go look at those changes. Now it says that requisition is created, meaning changes have done in the requisition. It will go to purchase order eventually. So I'll have to keep refreshing till the time it goes to purchase order. And ideally, this shouldn't be taking this much time, because it's a demo environment, not on the production configuration. So sometimes it takes time. Approved supplier list is required for automatic creation. We have a concept called ASL, and we'll talk about it when we talk about contract manufacturing. But to create the purchase order automatic, we don't need it. We need just a blanket purchase agreement. Can you please explain more on the supply order? How different it is from sales order or purchase order? Is it only internal to the client? It's a product. Supply chain orchestration. It's a product, and within that product there is an entity called supply order, and this supply order would help you to manage your demand picture, your supplies, and when you say supply, how your supplies are getting created. And this is supply chain orchestration's responsibility to make the supply available within your internal warehouse. Purchase order, you know that you have purchase order, which is into execution system, procurement execution system. Sales order is your demand picture, but the supply chain orchestration would help you to create the supply within the internal warehouse. Okay, let me see. So you've got purchase order now, you've got reservations and so on. So let me go back to our purchase order and see if the changes are reflected. So need by date. I think this is our purchase order. And if you go look at the schedule, you should be able to see that as the need by date as 22nd now. So you see here, it is changed to 22nd. So that was demand side change. Likewise, you can change the quantity. You could cancel it and so on. You could edit this purchase order. Let's say supply says, no, I am not able to give you on 22nd. I will give it on 23rd. You can go edit it and send that as 23rd, change that as 23rd. It will automatically it will go to supply chain orchestration, and supply chain orchestration would manage those changes automatically. So one of the capability of supply chain orchestration is to manage the changes automatically. You could try. There is a hands-on activity, I guess. You would probably know, raise the sales order with 10 quantity, and then go edit the purchase order and say, hey, I can provide you only 10 quantities. And then when you submit that change in the purchase order, it will feed back to supply chain orchestration, and supply chain orchestration would identify that there is a mismatch between the supply and demand, and then supply chain orchestration will try and mitigate that difference, and then it will go look at the alternate source of supply. Again, it will go to sourcing rule and identify whether there is alternate source of supply, and then it will create another purchase order which will be for another supplier, and then you will get this material in the same warehouse on the same date without notifying anything to the supply or the fulfillment manager. So that's the automatic change management which you could do. Now it says that it is awaiting receipt. So what I'm going to do is I'll go over and receive that purchase order. I'll go to warehouse receipt, and I know the purchase order. I'll say receive. As soon as I receive it, my reservation should change to on hand. I'll directly put it into store. I'll not do receiving and then delivery or put away. I'll just do it, put it into inventory, Calvin row, and submit. Now it says that receipt is created. I can go look at the reservations again. Go to manage reservations and pick, and now it should be on hand. I think I have PO. Okay, sales order. I could look at it by supply document as well. Now it says that it is changed to on hand. All right, so you can go look at it. And now if you look at the sales order, it should say that supply is available, goods available, and then order manager can trigger a shipment. So I'll go look at my status of supply order. I'll go search the order, and still says awaiting shipping. I can go to switch to fulfillment mode, and within the fulfillment mode I can go to fulfillment line, and within the fulfillment line I would know that there is a supply available now. So it says that goods available, right? Now you can notify your order entry specialist or order fulfillment manager or the fulfillment manager, and then fulfillment manager will go ship this sales order. So shipment is again nothing different than normal shipment. You can go warehouse shipment. and try and ship that sales order. Trying to ship the sales order now. Okay, pick view, pick release, and wait till the time you get the shipment number. Keep refreshing it. Yeah, you got the shipment. I don't know who has ability to speak, because I can hear somebody speaking. Yeah. Okay, all right. By mistake, I think I opened somebody's line, and that guy was speaking to somebody. Okay. All right. So do a ship confirm. You should be able to change the status to close, the shipment status. I'm not so sure who has got access to.
Yeah, Dharam, I think you lost the host, right?
Okay. No, I'm still host, Srini. Oh, no, I am.
So Kuamba is the host. So if you're hearing us, could you please assign the host role to Dharam? I don't know why that happened, but
yeah.
Do you see yourself on the attendee list? I don't see. I don't see him.
No, I don't see him under panelist. I don't see him under panelist.
Okay. So you're not listed on the attendees list as well. So what? Let me see what we can do.
We can get that host pin, Srini, from.
Yeah, but somebody is already a host, so I don't think. Give me 1 second. Let me see. Yeah, guys, please hold on for a few seconds. We'll resolve it. Okay, let me go ahead and say reclaim host role. You know the host key? All right, I think, yeah, you're back. Dharam.
All right. Srini, can you hear me?
Claim yes, I can hear you. Just claim the presenter role to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Share the screen.
I could share the screen, but now I can see that Comba as panelist.
Yeah, that's fine. So go ahead. We can see the screen now.
Yes.
Just see if you can. Just a second. See if you can make that Comba as just attendee and not the panelist. So just right click and see if you have an option. Okay, all right, great. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but I'm still not a host, Srini.
So you are the host, Dharam. Go ahead. We could see that you are the host.
Okay, all right. There is a background noise now. All right. Yeah. So apologize for that logistic issues. So now you see that shipment is closed, and if you say save and close, and you'll be able to see the status of shipment as interfaced. That means it is interfaced to ordering system, and then you would see that the shipment is done. So if you go back to the order, and you would be able to see now the shipment is done, and next step would be invoicing. So it says that awaiting billing, and what you can do is you can run the auto invoice import within the receivables, and then you should be able to create the invoice for this sales order. And if you go back and look at the order orchestration status or the supply order number status, it says that supply order closed, meaning supply order responsibility or supply chain orchestration responsibility is to make the supply available. And as soon as supply is available, it will say goods are available. And then as soon as you ship it, supply chain orchestration's role is over. It's done. It says that supply order is closed. It has fulfilled what it is intended to do. And then next step is go ahead and do a billing. Okay. Any question before we proceed further? I cannot see any presentation from. Okay, so cannot see that was issue. We lost the presentation. I think. Srini, is that still issue that presentation is not able to view? I think you're able to see my.
Fixed. Go. Yes, yes. Go ahead.
All right. So yeah, that's it from a demo standpoint. And what I have not done is I have not demonstrated the supply side changes, and I would ask you guys to do it yourself. And there are activities which you can go over, look at it. So let me quickly take you through the PowerPoint presentation, and which should be done in a few minutes time. So from the setup standpoint, you needed a setup into product management, meaning PIM. We did go over PIM, and then we talked about the item attributes, the specification. In global order promising, we talked about the sourcing rule. We can go back and look at the ATP rule as well in order management and in supply chain orchestration. So what are the setups which are needed in like product management, global order promising, order management, supply chain orchestration, manufacturing, procurement, and inventory. So from the back-to-back standpoint, back-to-back process standpoint, when you create the item within product management or PIM, you needed this back-to-back indicator as yes. If you go to sales order specification and then mark that as yes. From the global order promising, this is the ATP rule, which we have not looked at in the application, but you can go look at it. And supply chain availability search. This is the option. If you select this option, then system will go look at the on hand which is available. If the on hand is available, go reserve it against that on hand. All right. And we will talk about it from the component standpoint when we go over work order. So when we talk about contract manufacturing tomorrow, we will see if you want to search the components and resources. And this would be done if the recommendation is made. You'll have to specify all your supply types from where you are going to get supply. One of the important thing which you'll have to set here is the infinite time fence. This is again if you have long lead time in terms of manufacturing something, and let's say somebody order a product which takes 40 days to manufacture, and you have the infinite time fence set up as 20. Then what system does is it will make the supply available in 20 days. Even if you take 40 days, system will say, hey, supply will be available within 20 days. and you'll have to identify the infinite time phase carefully if you are manufacturing product which takes long lead time. So this infinite time phase, you'll have to calculate it appropriately. From the sourcing rule standpoint, you go define the sourcing rule. We need a local sourcing rule for back-to-back. You buy it from this, and this is the allocation percentage, and so on. You can have make, transfer, and so on. So these are the sourcing rules which we have already seen. OBR, this order management. You have got predefined processes for back-to-back. In order to catch, you might have seen the order orchestration processes, and you have flexibility to customize the order orchestration processes. You can add additional processes and so on. From the supply chain orchestration standpoint, they are all seeded. You in current release, you do not have flexibility to customize. That's something which you'll have to keep it in mind. And there are no mandatory setup in supply chain orchestration, which you have seen. You could go write your execution rule or enrichment rule if you want. Okay, from other setups standpoint, you would go over manufacturing. Within the manufacturing, you needed work definition. Again, like these are all covered in manufacturing foundation. So if your recommendation is back-to-back make, we needed a work definition, and then you go into manufacturing, and then you create your work definition, and within that work definition you have your item structure, you have got your operations. Operations are nothing but the routings, and you have your items within structure would go over those operations, and there are resources and so on. So you define work definition. And in purchasing, under blanket purchase agreement, there is a controls tab where you can specify automatically generate order. It is not mandatory setup. You could create purchase order manually. You can submit it for approval, and then, as I mentioned, that you can leverage the BPM capability to make it approved, or you can make that auto approved. So these are the setups which are needed for back-to-back. Any question before we take a break? We will quickly take maybe, or if you all are okay, we can continue with the next topic called dropships, and we will come back and talk about it. If you need break, just press that yes button on the participant panel, and I will see how many of you need a break. So I'm waiting for you guys to click on yes if you need a break. So it's a mix. I think we should take 5 minutes break, and we will switch over the laptop and be back in 5. So Srini, if you can unmute and
yeah, that's good. So yeah, sure. So we'll be back in 5 minutes, and then we'll get started with dropship. Thank you.
Srini, I made you host, so I'll take that host back. I cannot take that host back. Do you mind giving me host back?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. No, I'm not able to do it.
Okay, can you make the presenter at least yourself?
I'm the presenter. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay, welcome back from the break. Um, I would like to do a very quick audio check before I move on with the topic. So if you are able to hear me okay, so please confirm that either by raising your hand or clicking on a check mark or whatever means you can. Yeah. Okay, I just heard a couple of beeps, so I'll wait for some more to confirm. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So let's get started. Okay, so my name is Srini Dev Reddy. I'm again coming from the same team as Dharamis, and as both of us belong to Platform Technology Solutions team within Oracle Development, and both together are doing this session. I'll be taking you through few more sessions for the rest of the week. All right, so the current topic is dropship, and that's the key agenda for the next an hour or so. So we'll start with dropship overview, and we'll see the execution of the dropship, meaning a demo of the dropship, and also we'll touch upon few points on change management, and of course key setup and the configuration required for the dropship. So I'm sure all of you are aware what is a supplier dropship. So it's basically when customer creates a request or raises a request for an order. So you log the order, you create the order, and you will not be maintaining any of these items, any of these dropship items in your inventory. So you would typically be creating a purchase order against the against the supplier, and have those dropship items shipped to the customer directly. So you receive the sales order, or you create the sales order, and sales order would in turn be creating a purchase order against a supplier, and the supplier would in fact be shipping the goods directly to the customer. So you will not have any on hand, or you don't maintain any inventory of these dropship items. Rather, you would want to have supplier to send these items directly to the customer. So that's the supplier dropship. Now, Dharam has been talking about supply chain orchestration and the scheduling process, right? So when you submit an order orchestration process would kickstart, and the order orchestration process is instantiated. And the order orchestration process would in turn be looking for or checking against these three flows here. So the first thing that it does is it checks whether it's a dropship item or not. If it is a dropship item, it would take this path. If it is not a dropship item, it would come and check whether it's a back-to-back item. And if it is a back-to-back item, it is going to instantiate a supply chain orchestration process, and then it will take this path. So request supply is nothing but supply chain orchestration process, and it will take this path. If it's neither dropship nor back-to-back, it will be a standard order. So it will just reserve if there is quantity on hand and then ship the item. So these are the three different paths that order orchestration process can take. Okay, and for the current session, so we'll be focusing on the top one. So whenever the orchestration figures out that the item is a dropship item, it will take the further steps. It will take this path and it go on to the further steps. Now, how does the process identify that a particular item is a dropship or not? So that is typically and solely based on your sourcing rules. So it's not something that you capture at the item definition level. So there is nothing at the item level that you say whether this item is a dropship or not. There is no flag that you just enable saying this is a dropship item. There's nothing like that. So the only means by which GOP or the orchestration process can understand that this is a dropship item is looking at the global sourcing rule. So you need to have a global sourcing rule against the item saying that this item is sourced from the supplier, and that will make it as a dropship item. Okay, so when you submit an order, a scheduling job is done. During the scheduling process, the GOP will review the rules, and it will recommend or it will propose to the order orchestration process that this item is a dropship item. How does the GOP know? Because it looks at the global sourcing rule of the item and sees that this item is being sourced from a supplier. So this has to be a dropship item. So it informs to the order orchestration process back saying that, okay, so this is a dropship item and this guy is the supplier. Okay, so once the orchestration process has that information, it moves on with the rest of the process. Okay, so that's going to be the first step. Let's move on. So the same process that I was explaining in the previous slide. So if the scheduling result or if the recommendation from GOP is going to say that the item has to come from a supplier, then it's going to be a dropship. It could also say that this item is an internal warehouse sourced and it's a back-to-back item, then it's going to take this path. And if neither of these are true, then it's going to be a simple order or a standard order. Okay, so only in case of back-to-back, you would have supply chain orchestration triggered. Okay, otherwise, either in the dropship case or in the standard order case, you will not have SCO initiated at all, as Dharam was mentioning previously as well. Okay, now looking at the different products that they kind of integrate with each other during this process. As you see at the middle is the order management cloud. So here is where we are talking about dropship. And there is obviously an integration with GOP, integration with inventory, integration with procurement cloud and financials cloud. We'll see why you need an integration with, for example, procurement cloud or financial cloud, etc., as we go along. So this is a typical dropship process, which which I'll try to explain, and then we'll see a demo of it. So let's start from here. So I have a sales order for a specific item. So I enter the sales order and I choose the item and I click on submit. So I'm submitting a sales order. The moment you submit a sales order, as I was explaining previously, an order orchestration process gets instantiated. So order orchestration process gets instantiated. And the very first step that the order orchestration process does is to call GOP, meaning to schedule the order. So when you schedule the order, so it's going to call GOP, and GOP looks at the sourcing rules that have been defined for the item. It looks at the global sourcing rule and it finds that, okay, so this item has to be supplied by the supplier. So it recommends that the item has to be supplied from supplier, and it populates all that information. Now, order orchestration process looks at the information and it figures out that, yes, I think this is a dropship item. That's what GOP is saying, that it's a dropship item, and then it will move on to the next step. So the next step, what you're seeing here is a financial agreement that we are talking about. Just ignore that for the moment. I'll come back to this financial agreement. So here in this agreement, so this agreement is created in a product called Supply Chain Financial Orchestration Product, SFO, Supply Chain Financial Orchestration Product. So that's where you define this agreement. This agreement will essentially tell you a couple of things that the agreement is going to tell to the system, but we'll come to that right at the end of the flow. Okay, so there is some kind of an agreement. Then from the agreement, the orchestration process will get some information. So what is that information? I'll explain you in a second. But it moves on and it creates a purchasing request. So it raises a requisition, okay, against that particular item that has been ordered. So it creates a requisition, and the requisition can be automatically converted to a purchase order by having a purchasing agreement, or it can be manually done. So you can have approvals here, and a couple of managers approves it, and then it will be converted as a purchase order. Or you can say, I don't need any approval. Let the requisition be automatically converted to a purchase order. So this is done at the agreement level. I'll show you later. So the requisition is converted to a purchase order. The moment requisition is created here, what happens to the actual parent process? So you're looking at the order orchestration, but this is the key process. Whatever you're seeing in this swim lane is the actual the core parent process, right? So the moment it creates a purchasing equation, it just goes onto a waiting mode. You see, forget about the rest of the process. So it creates a equation and just keeps waiting. Waiting for what? Waiting for the shipment to happen. So it creates a requisition and keeps waiting. Now the requisition is automatically converted to a purchase order. So that's where you see the procurement product coming in. So you have a purchase order created. So here you see the purchase order getting created, and then supplier, you're coming to the supplier. So supplier looks at the purchase order. So you send the purchase order to the supplier in whatever means you want. So you may be sending them in email, you may be having a B2B integration automatically being sent, or you may be sending them a physical paper, etc. By whatever means you want. So you send the purchase order to the supplier, and let's assume the supplier has supplier portal. Supplier portal. So we have a supplier portal, and then supplier can see the purchase order in the supplier portal. Okay, and he looks at the purchase order, everything is fine. So he just ships the goods to whom? He's going to ship the goods to the customer because it's a drop ship purchase order. So there is enough information in the purchase order for the supplier to figure out that this is a drop ship purchase order. So I should not be sending it to this organization. Rather, I should be sending it to a customer. So I'll show you the purchase order, how it's different. So the supplier will look at the purchase order. He will realize that these items have to go to the customer directly. So he's going to send the products to the customer, and the moment he sends the product to the customer, he is going to inform us, right? So we have to know when the goods are shipped to the customer. So to inform us, he's going to send us an ASN, so advance shipment notice, from the supplier portal itself, or there are various ways in which you can send ASN. So you may be sending it through a website, you may be calling a web service, you may be sending it through making a phone call, for example, or you may be sending it in email. Or the most efficient way is to send it through the portal. So if you have a supplier portal, you can go and straightforward create an ASN and inform us. So this ASN is kind of informing us that the goods have been shipped. So when you know that the goods have been shipped, what should you be doing typically? Number one is the ASN should go back and inform the parent process that goods have been shipped. So don't wait now. So the parent process was waiting. Now that the goods have been shipped, so go and trigger that to move forward. Move forward with what? With invoicing the customer. So now that the goods have been shipped, I can go forward and invoice the customer. So that's one thing that ASN does. So obviously, because once you know the goods are shipped, you don't have to wait for the invoicing. So you move forward and invoice. Now there are two more things that the ASN does. One, it will create a logical receipt. So though you are not really receiving the item in your inventory, you still create a receipt here. Still creating what? Logical receipt. It's not a physical receipt. You're not having any items in your inventory. You're not going to receive any items, but there is a logical receipt that gets created and the logical delivery that gets created. The true transactions that will get created. Logical receipt and logical delivery. Why do you need them? You need them for accounting, number one. And you also need them in case you want to return if the customer returns the goods, you want to return them out of the inventory. So there are logical receipt and logical delivery transactions are created. These are purely logical. So they do not have any impact on-hand inventory of that item whatsoever, because this item was never in the inventory. So these are logical. Receipt and logical delivery. So that's the second thing that the ASN does. And it also does one more thing, as you can see here, this arrow going back. So that's the financial orchestration process. So it also triggers some additional events for accounting to happen, right? So what is that event that it triggers? It triggers an sales issue event. So from the purely accounting standpoint, you should account in such a way that you actually received the good, sent it to the inventory, and from inventory you have issued to the customer. So that's the accounting flow. But physically, that's not what's happening. Physically, goods are being sent directly to the customer, but just for the accounting system to track it, we will create these additional events like receiving, delivering, and issuing out of the inventory. So these are the logical transactions just for the accounting to be taken care of. Okay, so those are the three important things that ASN will trigger. Now, of course, there's going to be costing that would happen at every single step. Again, you will see a lot of that later from Wednesday onwards. So we'll not worry about costing and the accounting for first 2 days, for today and tomorrow. We'll focus on the flows. And from Wednesday is when we'll deal a lot with costing and accounting. Okay, so that's the flow. Very straightforward, very logical. Now let's go ahead and see that live, right? So before I get to the actual demo, these are again a couple of points that I have anyway previously mentioned. What exactly happens when you submit an order? Sourcing rules are read, and this dropship is recommended by GOP. Okay, so let me go back and talk about this piece. So I said you will create some kind of an agreement in supply chain financial orchestration. I said it will provide you with a couple of key elements. So what it provides you, this agreement provides you with is number one, where should the logical receipt happen, right? This logical receipt you are creating, in which inventory org you want that to be created, is defined by this agreement, right? You need to have some particular inventory in which you create the logical receipt, right? So that's identified in this agreement. And the second thing that's identified in this agreement is if the supplier has no ASN functionality, how can I know that the goods have been shipped? So if the supplier does not use ASN, then the other option that you have is for the supplier to send you the invoice. So supplier can either send you ASN or he can send you an invoice. And from the invoice invoice itself, the receiving of the invoice that at your end will trigger the same events that we have seen here. So these events that you're seeing can be either triggered by ASN or by invoice. So whether you are going to use ASN or invoice is identified in this agreement. That's the second piece that is identified in the agreement. So the agreement is primarily used for number one, where should the logical transaction be created? In which inventory org should you track the receipt and delivery? And secondly, whether you are going to use ASN or the invoice as a communication mechanism, as a triggering mechanism for the supplier to inform you that the goods have been shipped, right? So those are the couple of things that are tracked in the agreement. And this agreement is created in a product called financial orchestration. So we'll deal a lot with it later in the week, but that's where this is a mandatory step that you should have an agreement which identifies the inventory organization as well as the option that you're going to use, whether it's ASN or invoice. Okay, so that's essentially is the process. So I'm looking at the question, and before I move on to the demo, I want to make sure you understood the high-level process. Okay. So the question I see here is, can we have custom rules to determine if we can drop ship the order? Answer is no. So there are no custom rules as such. You would just be defining global rules. So you write a global rule for the item saying this item is sourced from a supplier. And this global rule, as if you have attended our order management workshop, you would understand that the global rules can be defined at different levels. You can define it at the site level, customer level, region level, item level, so on and so forth. There are various levels at which you can define this global rule. And then appropriate global rule will be picked, and then the item is supplier sourced or not is determined based on that. Okay. Oracle EBS has an option to dropship by changing the sourcing in external. So there is no provision for that in the cloud. So the only rule that will determine whether the item is dropship or not is the global sourcing rule. I will show you later as well. So I'll pick the item and show you exactly how the item's global rule is defined. Okay. Second question, is there a way to intervene before customer invoice to make changes? Example, freight terms or pay and add. So after supplier invoice is received, the freight charge from the supplier needs to be added to the customer invoice. Okay. Yeah, give me a second. Yeah, so we don't. So I'm just mark it as verb answer verbally. We don't have. No, we don't have that provision. So what you can, I would assume what you can do is to, if you have defined the supplier charges, which is more of a static data, not really dynamic data that you would get it at that point in time, but you define that in the supplier network, supplier network or supplier definition or supplier charges that you define, saying these are the freight charges for this particular supplier, but it's more of a static data, not really at that point in time. But I am very positive that we don't have any such functionality where you can dynamically at that point in time derive the freight charges and add them to the customer invoice, ER invoice that you are going to create. So I'm pretty much sure, but let me see if there are any alternatives. So let me see, who was that? I think it was Steve, I guess. So please post it in the forum. Steve, I'll get that confirmed. But my initial response would be that we don't have any functionality where you can dynamically add those charges to the AR invoice. Okay, another question. Do I understand correctly that there is no way to manually decide whether or not to drop ship the order at the time of order entry? Okay, so the question is it purely driven by the global sourcing rule, or do I have any way at the order entry time that I can force an item to be drop shipped? So yes, when you are entering an order, if you manually populate that you are going to source it from a supplier, meaning you go to scheduling tab and there you manually populate the supply information as supplier, then that will override the GOP recommendations. So if you manually populate a supplier when you are submitting an order, that will override the supplier recommendations or the GOP recommendations. If you don't populate anything, then it will go by GOP. But if you manually populate something during the order creation, that will take precedence over the GOP recommendations. I assume ASBN is also supported in place of ASN. You are right. It is supported. How is the freight chargeback handled when the customer is billed? So that was the extension to the previous question that I was discussing. So at the moment, as I answered previously, so there's a way to define the supplier charges, but that's more of a static definition, not really triggered by the current transaction. So please, as I was requesting, please post it in the forum. I'll discuss it and see if we have a mechanism by which you can capture the freight information dynamically and then get that added back to the AR invoice. Are there logical cost of sales entries when the order is confirmed based on the logical receipt? Yes, it is. So you have a logical receipt, logical delivery, logical issue, all of them accounted, and the cost of goods booked in the accounting. So you will learn about it later in the week. So there used to be a multiple leg support in EBS, ARG1 to ARG2 to ARG3. It could be mix of dropship and IRISO. Is it still supported in the cloud some way? Yes, Prakash, it is supported. So we do it by the product called financial orchestration. So we'll deal with this use case later in the week as part of, I think on Thursday, we have a separate session for financial orchestration. So there you can handle that multi-legged approach for several cases. So this answer is yes. Can you show the rules on the precedence of back-to-back plan recommendation, PO over the dropship, etc.? Yeah, so we actually dealt a lot with it during our O2C workshop, a 1 week workshop a couple of weeks back. But I will briefly show you how it looks like for dropship, and probably you should be able to relate to how it would have been in case of a PO shipped item. Okay. Does it support ASBN? Was another question. Yes, it does support ASBN. Okay, let me. Does it support change management? Yes, it does. We'll deal with it. Okay, let me get to the demonstration. So what we'll do now is let's create a dropship order. Okay, I'm going to go to order management. Okay, let's go through the flow probably first, and then we'll get to the setup. Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, I just clicked on create order. Let's have the BU populated, and we'll continue to use the same supplier. Sorry, same customer. Okay, so that's the basic information. So I have a dropship item that I have taken a note of. That's the dropship item. We'll see why it is a dropship item when we look at their its sourcing rules, right? So just one item, one quantity, and let me have it shipped by in a week's time, probably more than a week, 10 days time. Okay, that's it. So you see that the item price that you're looking at it is coming from our price list, and it's showing as 1350. Now when I submit an order, so it's going to add the tax to it, and you would see that it will go up to probably 1400 or something, 1474 or something. And let me take note of. And price was 1350. Okay, so that's the order. So when I submitted, it has initiated a order orchestration, and the order orchestration, the very first step that it does is to schedule the order, meaning call the GOP and get the recommendations. So the recommendations have been received, and they turn out to be a dropship recommendation, and so it moves on and creates a what? Requisition. So it created a requisition, and this requisition is going to be converted as a purchase order automatically in this environment. That's how we set it up. I'll show you the setup for that. So I should be able to see a purchase order getting created in a few seconds. So we can go to fulfillment view and go to fulfillment lines and see how it is being fulfilled. And a lot of information, but we are focused on supply details. How is it being supplied? And you see this portion called dropship. So unless the item is identified dropship, this information will not be populated. So you'll see information only here. If it was a warehouse sourced item, you would have seen the warehouse getting populated. This is all recommended by GOP. So GOP, instead of recommending a warehouse, it has recommended a supplier, and it's lagging systems. And a purchasing requisition got created, 203801. So this is going to be converted as a purchase order. So I'm just waiting for this purchase order information to be populated. Let's try to refresh and see if we can get that. Okay, yeah. So the purchase order is created. This is a dropship purchase order. So let's take note of it. Okay, so the purchase order is created. What would happen the moment the purchase order or the requisition is created? It goes and keeps waiting. That's exactly what we were talking about. It goes and this is done with, it's done with this step, and it's waiting. Now, this purchase order is sent across to the supplier, right? So let's see how this purchase order would look like. So for that, let me just query the purchase order. Purchasing, and I hope I have that copied. Let's take a look at this purchase order, how it would look like. And then we will ship the goods as a supplier. So I'm just querying the purchase order that was automatically created by the order orchestration process. And it has to be a bit distinct than the regular purchase order because it's a dropship purchase order. Okay, it's trying to query. All right, so that's the purchase order against the lagging systems. And that was the item that we initiated. And you see the price? Just 200. So the PO price is 200, meaning we are buying this item from the supplier for 200 and we are charging the customer 1350. So the differential amount is our profit. So our cost of goods is going to be 200. And the revenue that we are going to get is 1350 plus tax, whatever we have seen before. Okay, so where is this 200 coming from? So it can come from several places. So if you have a purchasing agreement with the supplier, then it will come from the agreement. Or if you can also define it at item level, what is the price, or you can manually populate it. Okay, so this is the purchase order. So a couple of interesting things here in the purchase order. So let me go to the details. Okay, so destination type is not inventory, it's a dropship. And where should the items be sent to? Delivered to location is the customer location. And this organization that you are seeing, 003, is the inventory organization that where the logical receipt and logical delivery will get created. Where is this coming from? 003. It is coming from the financial agreement we talked about. So I said in a financial orchestration, you create an agreement, and that's where you specify what is the logical inventory organization. So that's coming from there. We'll see that agreement in a second. But yeah, this is how it's different. And by looking at it, you know that it's a dropship purchase order. All right. So now that you have the purchase order, let's change our hat or let's change our login to supplier. And let us ship the goods. Okay, I'm changing my role to supplier. And as supplier, I have supplier portal license. So I have given my supplier an access to it. So my supplier is now logging into the supplier portal, but this need not be only way that the supplier can communicate to us. As I said, ASN can be sent through web service or phone call or email and whatever way you want to send it. But because we have anyway the portal subscription, portal license, so why don't I send it through supplier portal? So the supplier, now I am the supplier and I'm looking at the purchase order that I've got, and I shipped the goods to the customer, and I want to inform you that I have shipped the goods. So how would I do that? I'll just create an ASN, right? And let me give some name, some shipment number to the ASN. What is the date? I think 20th March 1st. And I would say that one quantity has been shipped. All right, and submitted. So I'm sending an ASN. So I'm informing order management that I've shipped the goods to the customer. So what should happen now? As I was explaining, so we are here. ASN has been sent. Now that is going to create a logical receipt, logical delivery. It's also going to trigger logical issue. Okay, and it is also going to inform the orchestration process to move on. Don't wait anymore now. Goods have been shipped. Go and invoice the customer, right? So let's look at order status. Let's look at this first, and then we'll look at the logical receipt. So let's look at the order status. So it was waiting for shipment before. Let's see what it is now. So awaiting shipment. Now you see that it's awaiting billing. So the shipment has been done. Now I can move on and bill this particular customer, right? So that's the first thing. Now, secondly, as I said, It will also create a logical receipt. So let's take a look at the logical receipt. So I'm going to open another page and see whether the logical receipts are created. So where can we find the receipts in the receipts area? Which organization we expect the receipt to be? So we said 003. That's where we want the logical receipt to be created. And lines received today, I have 4 of them. So, and lines delivered is 4. So let's look, what are the 4? So we should find ours in as one of them. So what's our document number? Our document number was 28872. So that's the top one. So we received them, right? And we also delivered them. This is the logical receipt. So you don't find, so that's the one, 2872. And you see there is no sub inventory or anything. So it does not have any impact on the on hand quantity. It's just a logical receipt and logical delivery. So that's the third one, second one. And the third one we'll show you later in the week is the financial orchestration trigger. And this primarily will take care of the issue, sales order issue. That's again a logical accounting, right? So logical receipt, logical delivery, and this takes care of logical issue. We'll see that later in the day. Okay. Because you need to understand what is a financial orchestration to understand that. But logically, you just assume that it will complete the typical accounting transaction. All right. Now, where is our order? So, sorry. That's our order. So it's waiting for billing to happen. So let's go ahead and do the billing. How do you do that? I know that the order orchestration process is awaiting billing. Before it went to awaiting billing, it had populated the AR interface table. So it populates the AR interface table and just keeps waiting for the AR to pick it up so that it will move on from awaiting billing to a closed status, right? So let's log in as a financial user and pick them up in AR. So those records are sitting in the inventory. Those records are sitting in the interface table of receivables. So I'm going to pick them up and create an invoice. The moment I create an invoice, the order status will move to closed status because the order orchestration process is done with its job. What was its job? Right from order capture to fulfillment and billing. So all of that is done, so it will end its process. So let's pick up the records that were inserted into the AR interface table to create an invoice. Okay. So to do that, I have to run auto invoice program. Okay, I'm looking at the question meanwhile. Okay, it has come. I'll come to the questions in a second. Okay, what is the name of the process? The name of the process is import auto invoice. Hopefully that should pick up our records. So I'm going to give, let it come up. So yeah, that was US1 business unit, and the source where it is coming from is DOO. So that's our order orchestration process that has populated the records, right? And so let's give the sales order number as well. So just only our records need to be picked. So hope I have that. That's the sales order number. So I'm going to give our own sales order. So let's pick only our records. and submit it. So this process should pick up our records and create an invoice, and not just create the invoice, but once it creates the invoice, it has to inform the order orchestration process that an invoice has been created, so that it will go and close itself, right? So let's see. So while that runs, let me look at the questions. The question is, the logical receipt is typically represent customer receipt. There may be time gap between ASN and receipt. How is it accommodated in the process? So that's not handled as part of the out-of-the-box process. So the out-of-the-box process just triggers the flow the moment it receives the ASN. So the flow is based on shipment rather than the receiving event. So the moment the goods are shipped, the seeded flow assumes that you can go ahead and bill the customer. But if you have a requirement where the customer says, no, you cannot bill the customer the moment you ship the goods. Rather, you should wait for an acknowledgement from the customer that they have received the goods. Only then you can bill them. Then what you need to do is to customize the default seeded order orchestration flow. And we discussed a lot about it in our order management workshop. So the order management workshops, we spend a day out of 5 days to explain you how to customize the seeded orchestration flow. So you can customize the seeded orchestration flow. So in your case, what you would do is you customize the seeded orchestration flow, and what you do is don't trigger on the event of ASN. Rather, you wait for the customer to inform you that he has received the goods. Only that should be triggering the rest of the transaction. So you would insert a pause kind of a node in the orchestration flow, and that pause will be moved forward, or the pause will be released only after you receive the acknowledgement. Now it's up to you how you want to track that receiving of an acknowledgement. Is it over the phone call, or do you get it through email, or the customer himself will make a web service call to you to inform you that he has received the goods, right? So there are various ways in which you can achieve it, but the out of the box flow is as follows. It will just depend on whether the goods have been shipped or not. So the moment the goods are shipped, system will go ahead with the billing. But if you want to change that, yes, you can. So the logical receipt will happen when the customer receive the goods. No. So the logical receipt is going to happen the moment goods are shipped. As I said, right? The supplier will send you an ASN when goods are shipped. So the moment the goods are shipped, logical receipt is created in the system. But if you want that to change that behavior, as I said, you have to customize the order orchestration process. Okay, I'll come to the questions, please, in a second. So let's complete this logical flow. So you see that the invoice has been imported, and you see something like notify feeder system. So the invoice import program has gone ahead and informed or notified the order orchestration process that it has created an invoice. So the invoice has been created. Now, what would the order orchestration process do? It was awaiting billing previously. Now it should go and close it. So the order is closed because the customer has been billed as well, right? Now you can go to the AR and take a look at this invoice as well. So when you look at this invoice in AR, what would be the amount that is charged on the invoice? So that is somewhere around 1350 plus something. That's what you charge to the customer. And for the supplier, you will have a separate invoice through which you will pay this 200 to the supplier. Right? That's a separate process. Okay. Now that is what our dropship flow is. And so I'll take a few questions and then we'll see the setup of it, right? And also a couple of points on the change management. Okay. How would one process an ASN via a phone call? That is, how would a user enter an ASN on behalf of the supplier? Yeah, so the user can enter an ASN Say, for example, supplier does not use supplier portal, so we don't have license for supplier portal. Assume that I don't have a subscription for supplier portal. So how do I know that ASN has been done? How do I know that goods have been shipped? So probably supplier will email you, or supplier will call you up. The moment you receive the call, you can go to receipts and create an ASN manually. I think I'm already there. Create ASN. So that you would do it manually if you're not using portal. Okay, can we also recognize the revenue after customer confirmation? Okay, so that's totally different question. So the question is, at what point in time you want to do the billing? At what point in time you want to do the revenue recognition? So in AR, the moment you create a AR invoice, you don't have to recognize the revenue. You can defer that. So within AR, within receivables, we have a functionality called revenue recognition, right? So you can define a revenue recognition rule saying that don't recognize the revenue now, wait until the customer confirms. So the initial accounting that happens would happen to the deferred revenue account, and then only after you get the confirmation that deferred revenue account will be knocked off and the actual revenue is booked. So within AR, you have a capability to defer the revenue until the customer acknowledges it. So that's a purely an AR functionality. Maybe this was discussed during the order management session. Can you please let us know how can we have different order type and link to different AR transaction type for dropship orders? Okay. So let me think about it. Yeah, so I think within AR, there is a functionality through which by which you can derive the transaction type based on the source that you have on the record. So the source here is coming from DOO, which you cannot change, by the way. So source is always going to be DOO. DOO meaning distributed order orchestration process. So based on this source, you can derive the AR transaction type in the AR. So that to that extent, you can do it. Is the customization allowed in the cloud? So customization of the order orchestration process is allowed in the cloud. So we have to look at what customization we are talking about. So I cannot have an unqualified statement here. So I don't say customizations are allowed in the cloud. I would say customization of order orchestration process is allowed in the cloud. Do we provide supplier portal access to our suppliers? Yes, so that's the main intent. Supplier portal is exposed to suppliers so that they can do the self-service by themselves. Does process support in core terms? For example, billing cannot be raised until goods are received by customer. Yeah, this was we discussed that. So answer is yes. Dropship return order still works same as EBS, or is it different? So the return process is as follows. So when the customer returns the goods, so it's kind of a bit of manual process at the moment. So what you do, you will be creating RMA against the receipt that you have, right? And against the sales order issue that you have, a logical transaction and the delivery transaction, etc. And you would also be creating an RTV transaction, return to vendor transaction, to send the goods back to the supplier. So it's a manual process. You create an RMA and you create an RTV. Okay, so let me move on. Those are the questions that I have. So I'm moving on to the next topic, which is change management. So all of these, the slides that I'm leaving you with, we have covered all of that. So coming to the change management. So it can come from several places, right? So it can come from order. So what's happening? Sorry for that. So it can come from, it can come from order management, so meaning the order itself is being revised. in several places, or it can come from planning. So if the order request was originated from the planning module, so the planning may recommend something else now, or it could come from supplier, meaning from procurement. Okay, let's look at each of these cases and what are the limitations at the moment. Now, you know that a purchase requisition is created first, and the requisition is converted to a purchase order. Okay. Now, before that purchase requisition is created, meaning before the order is scheduled. Okay, that's a standard order management, change management that is applicable. So before the purchase requisition is created, the change management that is allowed is same as the standard order change management. Again, we covered a lot about change management in our order management workshop. So you can define rules, you can define constraints, what is allowed, what's not allowed, and all of that. That standard change management is applicable if requisition is not created yet. If the requisition is created, but PO is not created yet. So requisition is created, it is not converted to the PO yet. Then no changes are allowed except cancellation. That's because our procurement does not allow changes to the requisition. So obviously, so if you don't allow the changes to the requisition, you can't allow changes to the orders, right? And hence, only cancellation is something that's allowed. Now, after the purchase order is created and the goods are not shipped, then whatever changes that you do are propagated across to the purchase order. The changes that you do to the sales order are propagated across to the purchase order during this period. Okay. Once the PO is shipped, there's very little that you can do. Okay. Now, these are the limitations that we have. And in the process flow, so you're looking at changes coming from the order capture. So order manager is changing something, right? And GOP is also recommending back based on the change, and those changes are propagated to the purchase order, right? So this is the phase where goods are not shipped yet. Purchase order is created, but goods are not shipped. Sorry. So those changes will be propagated to the purchase order. Now, if it is coming from a planning, say for example, planning has revised its plan. So now it is saying, go and choose some other supplier. So some other supplier is recommended now, in which case the previous purchase order is cancelled and a new purchase order is booked against a new supplier. So those changes are propagated back to the purchase order. If it is the change is coming from the purchasing, meaning the supplier himself is saying, okay, so you asked me to send 10 items, but I don't have 10. I have only 5. So I can send 5 now, and maybe next 5 I can send it only 2 weeks later. So that kind of a change can come from supplier. So in which case, a new fulfillment line is created, and the quantity is split in line with the PO schedules. So now the PO schedules will be split by the supplier saying that 5 items I can send you now, next 5 you have to wait for 2 weeks. So those scheduling that you do at PO level will be propagated back to the fulfillment split at the sales order level. Okay, so that's a two-way propagation that we are talking about. So any changes in a sales order will be propagated to the PO. Any changes in the PO will be propagated back to the sales order. So this is all done because of our orchestration process. So the orchestration process can communicate forward as well as take the changes back to the source. Okay, so now let's look at the setup that you need to do. The first setup that you need to do is in FSM. Okay, let me go to FSM. Setup and maintenance. Couple of options that you need to enable. Okay, let's look at procurement. At procurement level, so these are the 2 settings that you need to do. One in procurement, another is in order management. So let's look at the procurement. So in procurement, you go to features, and then you find something called as an customer sales order fulfillment. So you're kind of saying procurement should be enabled to fulfill sales orders. Right? It's kind of a checkbox that you would do. That's the first step. And also the other way, in the order management, you would enable dropship purchase orders. So in the order management, you would go and see the feature called dropship. So these are the two checks that you need to do. It's all documented, so you don't have to really remember that. Yeah, so that's the first step. So you make sure you have enabled the features. Second is the item setup. So let's go look at the item setup. Couple of things you need to do at the item level. I'll come to the questions in a second. Yeah, item, right? So let's query the item. I hope I remember. There are a couple of things that you need to item level is the flag that you need to enable and also list price. So let's see any of them. Specifications. Okay, purchasable flag should be enabled. That's the first setup, and purchase price. So if you don't have agreements in place, you can define the price here. So maybe I will say 200 here. If you don't have agreement, if you have an agreement in place, it will pick up from agreement. If you don't have an agreement in place, it will pick up from here. So let's take a look at that agreement that I've been talking about. So in our case, we had an agreement. So it has picked 200 from the agreement, not 446 from here. Rather, it picked from 200. So let's see where it got picked. So let me take you to that. This is what we're talking about. So you need to have an agreement. That's optional. Agreement is something that's optional. So you would have an agreement. Okay, I don't have purchasing rights on this. So I have to change the user that has purchasing roles assigned. So I'm going to switch the user. Calvin has that. So there are a few things that you define in a purchasing agreement. Let's query the agreements that we have. Manage agreements. And I have the supplier name. Lacking systems. So that's the agreement we have. You see that we have an agreement with the supplier saying this item you're going to charge me. This was the item that we chose. You're going to charge me 200. Right. So that's the price we defined. Along with it, I also want you to take a look at the controls tab here, and that will take a couple of things. Automatically generate orders. So the moment there is a requisition, convert it to a purchase order automatically, and automatically submit for an approval. So because I had enabled these two, it just moved forward without any manual intervention. So the purchase requisition was created and immediately it was converted to an order. So if you don't have this enabled, you may have to manually create a purchase order out of the requisition. Okay, and what else? The setups that we need to do is of course, you need to have suppliers and supplier sites defined. And let's take a look at the sourcing rules, which most of you are interested in. Okay, so let me go to sourcing rules. Okay, let me close this one. Again, I'll not go into detail because that's the topic that we covered 5 days. So let's look at for the specific item that we have. What are the rules defined? Where is item? Yeah, 53035. So I'm just filtering the records. Doing the filtering. Okay, so these were the rules defined for this item. And let's look at the global rule here. And that's the rule. Rule name is B-lagging. So we can click on view sourcing to see the rule. So I'm clicking on view sourcing. So you see that it's a global rule for this specific item, and it is saying buy from the supplier. So you can have two options for global sourcing, either buy or transfer. Transfer meaning from inventory. So you're saying either you buy from the supplier or source it from the inventory. So if you choose buy from for a global sourcing rule and give the supplier name here, it is a dropship. That's it. So this is the only indicator for the system to know that, or for the GOP to know that this item has to be sourced from supplier and it's a dropship. Okay. Now for the B2B kind of stuff, where you may be sourcing the item from the supplier, you may be buying the item from supplier, but you will bring that item to the inventory first in B2B case, as Dharam was explaining previously. So you bring the item to the inventory first, and you will do the shipping. So for those items, you will not have a global sourcing rule saying buy from. You will have a global sourcing rule saying transfer from, because your inventory is the source there. Ultimately, you may be bringing it from supplier, or you may be bringing it from some other inventory, or you may be manufacturing it. So it could be transfer, or it could be buy, or it could be make. But ultimately, it's going to be sourced from your inventory. So that is what global sourcing rule will tell to the system, whether you are ultimately sourcing it from the inventory or you are sourcing it directly from the supplier. So any item that you want it to be drop shipped, you must define a global sourcing rule with buy. That's it. There is no flag or anything else. Okay. Now let's look at that's it. I think we covered pretty much all the. So we'll come to this. Okay, let me go ahead and briefly show you, but don't worry if you don't understand. We are going to cover the financial orchestration later in the week. So, but for the sake of completeness, I will just show you that last setup as well, which you need to do. It's a mandatory, by the way. So let me go to financial orchestration. And there you define that agreement that I talked about. Though we call it as an agreement, it's in fact is an orchestration flow. So go here and you see dropship financial flow. Again, we are going to talk about it in detail later in the week. That's the flow I defined, and you open it, and I will show you a couple of things. Okay, let's not do that. Let's not edit it. So there are a couple of things I want you to note. So you see that I said you can choose either ASN or invoice, right? So here is where you specify what you are planning to use. You have two options here, ASN and invoice. So I've chosen ASN as the triggering event. And where should the logical transaction be created? This is 003, Chicago. So for this BU, or for this legal entity, Chicago is my logical inventory for the dropships. So these are the two important things that you define in the agreement. And this agreement or this definition is mandatory for dropship to work, because this will take care of the sales order issue logical transaction, which is very important, because that's when your COGS is booked, right? So without this defined, system will throw an error. It will not allow you to complete the orchestration flow. Okay, so that's all I intend to cover. Let me take a look at the questions and then we'll wind up. All right. on dropship conditions on global sourcing rule, where do you specify which is logical organization? So logical organization, you do not define it in a sourcing rule. You define it right here. I was showing you, right? So just open the orchestration flow, and here is where you define the logical organization, where the logical transaction should happen if you are using this BU on this legal entity. If you are using some other BU on some other legal entity, it could be some other logical inventory. Can you create a global sourcing rule with buy from without a supplier and then have a buyer decide on supplier at the time of the PO created? No. So either you have to specify in the global sourcing rule, or you need to manually populate in the sales order. Can we have a common agreement for all BUs, or it has to be one agreement per BU? Yeah, you have to define them separately. So you will not have a kind of all BUs and all legal entities here. So you have to define them separately. Similar to order orchestration process, do we have purchase orchestration? No, we don't have it. Regarding my previous question related to the different order types and linking to AR invoice types, so it seems it's not supported in the cloud, unlike EBS release 12. Please let me know if there is any other way to differentiate such orders and invoice. So Amit, I would really, I don't know the answer. If there are any other ways to achieve it. So I would really request you if you can post it in the forum. I will try to reach out to a few of our guys and see if we can figure out a workaround for it. So please drop a note in the forum and I'll pick it up from there. Any specific setup to identify where the logical org is picked? Yeah, so this is one. This is where maybe you posted it before I have shown it. Yeah, this is where you do it. What happens when the supplier cannot meet requested order quantity and revises the schedule, and then customer also decides to order less? In this case, we have to adjust the fulfillment line as well. So the question is, if there are two requests, one change is coming from customer, other change is coming from supplier. So it depends on which comes first, right? So if the supplier is saying that he cannot meet the requirement, so he has to split the schedule. So that will be taken care first. And then if there is a customer request as well, so that depends on whether the customer is in line with supplier, what supplier recommended, or it's something totally different. So both of them will be cumulatively handled. But if there is a case where the process itself cannot decide what to do, it will just throw an error and wait for order manager to intervene. So from the orchestration work area, an order manager can intervene and override and do manual steps. So these are the stuff where these are the cases where order management has to intervene manually. The orchestration process does not know what to do. Then it just pauses and throws an error, and you can see an error in the work area, and then you have to act on it manually. How do I set up sourcing rule if I want the supplier to send an item to my inventory for B2B process without triggering dropship? Yeah, so you would not define so you would define a global sourcing rule in that case, not as buy, but as transfer. So I said, when you define a global sourcing rule, there are two options, buy and transfer. So you would then define it as a transfer. And further, you would define a local sourcing rule. There are two sourcing rules. Again, we don't intend to cover this. That's the reason why we want you guys to attend the prerequisite workshops, because advanced fulfillment cannot be understood without understanding the basic fulfillment. Right? That is handled in our order management workshop. It's a extensive 2-hour topic discussing about sourcing rules. How do you write a sourcing rule for B2B? How do you write a sourcing rule for dropship? So all of that is already explained. But in essence, I'll briefly tell you. So if you have not attended the workshop, so at least I would recommend is to, in the workspace, go to the order management content. And there you pick up the student guide and just search for global sourcing rule and the local sourcing rule. So beautifully explained by taking a couple of use cases how you can do it. But I'll very briefly tell you what you have to do. So in your example, let me click it as answered verbally. So in your example, what you would do is, the first thing that you would do is to define a global sourcing rule. But in the global sourcing rule, you would choose as transfer, because it's not a buy. It's not, you're not sending them directly from the supplier. So you choose it as transfer. Then you will define a couple of local sourcing rules. In the local sourcing rules, you would have an option of buy from this supplier. So what the system would do is, first it will evaluate the global sourcing rule and it will find that, okay, so this is being sourced from inventory. Okay, now from the inventory, how are you going to source it? Is defined by the local sourcing rule. And here in your case, local sourcing rule is going to say buy. So which is like combination of inventory plus buy, meaning you have to buy it, keep it in inventory, and then ship it. In the dropship case, the global itself will say buy, meaning there is no inventory involved at all. So it will directly go to the supplier request and then send it across directly. That's the key difference. So in a dropship, you'll have just a global sourcing rule. In a typical B2B purchase process, what you would have is a global sourcing rule saying transfer and the local sourcing rule saying buy. Okay, so hopefully that gives some clarity. If not, yeah, please look at the student guide. Where in sales order can we populate the supplier? Yeah, so in a sales order, you create all the sales order. You don't submit it. You go to supply. So the second tab and then go to supply. Here is where you can manually populate it. You can manually populate the warehouse or you can manually populate the supplier. This will override your GOP or your sourcing rules. Is EDI available? Yes, it is. And I think, let me see. I think I have given you a couple of links in the workspace. So I think I have identified I have given you a couple of links for the B2B transfer, B2B integration. Okay. We have multiple divisions in one BU and want to capture the sales order per division. How is it possible? We have multiple divisions within one BU. So Anshul, you have to clarify what exactly you mean by multiple divisions in one BU, because the enterprise structures are as follows. So you'll start at legal entity, right? And the legal entity can have multiple BUs in it, and each BU can have multiple inventory organizations, right? That's the flow. So if you're talking about the inventory organization level, a BU having multiple inventory organizations, the sales order is still booked at the BU level. And then you will choose where you want to source the item from any of these inventory organizations. So there is no concept of divisions under BU, right? Under BU, what you find is an inventory organization. That's it. So there is no other entity that you can define under BU. Or you have departments. Departments have no role to play in supply chain, more for HCM standpoint. Okay, so I wanted to show you on B2B. Okay, I don't have them here. So I'll populate some links here for the B2B. The answer is yes, we do support B2B, and we have extensive support for XML exchange of information. We have a messaging framework in supply chain. We do cover some part of it again in our previous workshop, but look for messaging framework in supply chain. You have a lot of documentation that talks about various messages that are supported. Like we support purchase order changes, how you can communicate them across to the supplier, invoices, how you can receive from suppliers. There are various sales order changes that you can inform. You can be informed by the external service sources, or you can inform the external entities of the changes that are happening within the cloud. So it's a two-way messaging mechanism with an external world that we support for various objects. As I said, sales order, purchase order, invoices, and all of that. It's all documented as part of the messaging framework documentation. Okay, so that's all for today. So I had requested a couple of you at least to post your question in the forum so that I can follow them up. So please do so, and then I'll get back to you. All right, so, and what activities need to be performed is again documented here. So you just go by lessons. So these are the lesson numbers 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13. These are the lessons that you have to do activities for, and you would get an activity guide right here. So you have one more week for the environment. It will be with you for one more week. So make the best use of time that you have to do the activities, and then feel free to post it in the forum if you have any questions. So tomorrow it's going to start with IMT. So I'm going to start with IMT tomorrow morning, and then Dharam will be back to talk about consigned and contract. Okay, so thanks a lot for your time today, and we'll see you tomorrow morning with IMT. Thank you, and bye-bye.